Zoom in on Mike and Jason.
Yeah.
Jason's attorney would appreciate that.
Is anyone pointing to us?
Yeah,
Oh, crap. Why?
because I gotta get some depth.
It's like the Price is Right, you
How
know,
much
the
you spend?
audience.
Oh, these are your cameras, Sonny?
All of them except one.
How much did you spend on these?
These are old.
Filmed in front of a live studio audience.
And even being in this class, right? You guys care if I keep this door open? Is that all right? Too hot?
You're the producer, bro.
Right. All right, I'm gonna pass out a folder that's gonna have packet of information you can keep from your bid.
Yeah, where is that at? Look at this. Did you buy the folders too?
These are mine, but I ended up getting some.
Reversed, I hope?
I don't like this color.
That's a pretty color.
What's a bid?
Very legal.
All right, I would assume that you have everything that you need in here. Some handouts in here are new. Some of them you've seen before. The MHFD aerial hydraulic operations. That, after I wrote the title, it kind of was confusing. It's water hydraulic operations, not operations for the boom. So that's what that means.
I understood what you meant.
The Blitz Fire, that's also new. And everything else should be something you've seen before. The checkoff sheets, now that I hear. So there's two checkoff sheets. These are your orientation checkoff sheets. These are the checkoffs that you would do to get checked off specifically on the truck for the compartments. It's not the pump part, okay? I have that checkoff separate. So this is what you would need to know to be familiar with that specific truck. It's really nothing to do specifically with pumping, but it's just so that you're familiar with the vehicle. So as new guys are hired, these are the sheets that they would check in order to get comfortable with the how to run the specific equipment on each vehicle. There's a copy of the MHFD pump operators post-incident review. If you can kind of just keep an eye on this and hang on to this so that the next time you are the pump operator at a fire scene and something does happen, so that you have this and you can fill this out. All right. Jim, I forgot to get to you on the last part of it.
Yeah, I tried to look for it
Yeah.
in the watch office and I couldn't.
So I don't know if there's anything you remember that you can still fill
Yeah,
this
I
out.
can-
If so, it'd be fine and dandy.
I couldn't find it.
The next is this pump operator qualification. This is, you've seen this before. This just lists some of the things that we're gonna review today. And some things we won't review. All right. So remember what this course entails. It entails 4 parts. The first part is a hydraulics course, which is what you're in right now. That also ties into the practical part. I have copies of the checkoff for the practical part. That'll be done at some other time. Remember, this is obviously being video recorded so that the other shifts have access to this. So, that being said.
Where are the cameras?
So just be aware. Like I said, this is 4 parts. The first one is the hydraulics test with the hands-on practical that you would go through for each vehicle. All right. Then you have the driver's course, which has already been done, maps, and I think that's it. All right. And then the specific vehicle checkoff, which is in here. The course has been changed a little bit. Some of the slides you're going to see are different, but for the most part, all the guts are the same. There's some things that I've just added on here over time that we should cover that are on here. Also, the checkoff part is a little bit different now. Historically, when we ran you through the checkoff part of the course, what you did was you just kind of ran through it, and the assumption is that you've already been connected to water, and then you're just going to run it from there. It is different now. The assumption is going to be that you're gonna dump the tank and that you're gonna be physically responsible for making the connection, okay? What we wanna emphasize with that is that we need to get water on the fire as soon as possible, right? So the fastest way to get water is to dump the tank, okay? That all goes back to modern fire behavior. You know, we're trying to get water to the scene of the fire as soon as possible. So the scenario is gonna play out that way where you're gonna be the guy, and you're going to be the one who has to make the connection. In reality, would that happen? Probably not, but we wanna make sure that if need be, you know, you're responding on a 2 or 3 firefighter day where you guys are on the engine, that part can get completed in a decent amount of time. Also, because I'm a prick, I've added a few what I would call random scenarios that you're going to be asked at the end of the scenario. These are just things that I feel like we don't do enough of and we don't touch on enough of. It's immaterial whether you know what to do on the randoms or not. But I'll ask you to do a random thing. Some of them are just like a little quick question, it'll be done. Others may be a little bit more involved. It's just which random card you pull that day, whether you're lucky or you're unlucky, right? But we'll run through each one of those. One person will be quote unquote tested on it, but everybody will get a chance to voice their opinion and share in that particular task or whatever it is. Okay? Is there any questions anybody has up front about anything? I would hope that we can try to get through this today. You know, I don't know how this is gonna go. We've already been delayed an hour and a half, so it is what it is.
How long is the course in this portion?
This is about 2 or 3 hours. Depending. Again, a lot of the stuff we've reviewed, but there are a few additions, and you may recognize some slides you won't. All right?
You still got the cough, huh?
Yeah.
Slow down.
I had that thing for over a month.
Thanks.
You are now about to witness the
Slow
strength
down,
of
but
street knowledge.
slow down.
NWA?
Little NWA, little Hall of Fame, Cleveland Rock Hall of Fame, NWA, showing you where it's at, right? So this is Introduction to Basic Pump Operations. We do have an advanced pump operations course. I've never actually done it before, but there is an advanced. So if you're wondering why there's a basic, why it's called basic, there is an advanced part, but it's never happened before. Maybe someday.
Country.
Okay, as a standard operating procedure, I'm not going to delve on this too much. There is some soapboxing that has to be done with this course, and the reason I bring this up is simply because when I first started here, there was no formal introduction onto how to operate pumps. It was basically one of those things where you were just thrown on the truck and maybe you took the thing out back, ran through a few scenarios or so, and basically you became the pump operator then. I can go over countless stories of times where I myself was the pump operator and things did not go well. I don't have really issues sharing those bad scenarios, but I just felt like with no formal training at the academy, which I think is weird if you think about it, that at the academy, the one thing they don't tell you how to do is operate the pump, which is incredibly odd, considering that is our primary focus, is getting water onto the fire, but they don't teach you how to do that. Just bizarre to me. When I was at the academy, I asked one of the king of the academy people at the time, I'm not going to say his name, you guys all probably know who he is if you were there during the 90s. But I asked him specifically, I said, when do we review, or when do we go over the pump? And his exact words to me is that every fire pump operates differently, and you'll learn how to do that when you get to your station. I think we are very knowing that is absolutely 100% false. They all operate exactly the same, and that's how it goes. You can't trust these guys. It's like leaving toys in your kids, right?
Yeah.
All right, I think I remember where we were at. We're just finishing up on our soapboxing. Does anybody remember going to the academy and actually doing some sort of pump training while at the academy?
Yes.
Yeah, what did you do?
Pump.
Like what?
Hooked up the hydrant.
Yeah, but did they teach you how to operate the pump specifically?
Mhm.
They did?
Yeah, mine, yeah.
Where'd you go?
Lake County.
Oh. Well, they didn't do that at Tri High, I'll tell you that.
When did you forget all of it, Dave?
He's kidding.
Keep
All right.
running them down.
All right, so here's some phrases and actions that we should avoid using. How about this one? I have a different way of doing it. Now, this is not necessarily bad, but as long as your different way of doing it is a correct way, I really don't care. But my point is that everybody's doing things the same way, and if we're doing things the same way, that tends to alleviate any problems, right? So we should try to avoid using that. How about this one? I have the pressures memorized. Can anybody tell me why? Now this is actually somewhat hard to do because if you review it every time you're the pump operator, you're going to get to the point where you're going to memorize what some of the pressures are. But why is this bad?
Something changes.
Right, if something changes, then all of a sudden now what do you do, right? So let's avoid memorizing pressures. How about this one of my favorites? Friction loss is 10 psi for every 100 feet. This is actually what I was taught when I first got here. What's wrong with this?
Absolutely nothing.
It's a different way.
It's different. Each line is different.
That's
line
right,
hose is different.
each hose is different, so there's no possible way that this particular formula or system would work for every hose since every hose is different and the nozzles are different. So let's avoid using that. All right, why do you think this class is the hardest class to teach and the hardest class to learn?
Tradition.
Heck yeah, that's right. Tradition, right? You've been doing things the same way for a certain while. It's hard for someone to come in here and try to tell you that you're doing things wrong or you're doing things differently or you should try to change it. So that's one of the big reasons why. But there are some other reasons. Of course, there's years of doing it one way and an unwillingness to change. If you've been doing it your way, you feel like you're comfortable doing it, you've been doing it for X amount of years, it's hard for someone to come in with a different tactic that you're not comfortable with. Lack of training, of course, that's incredibly important. How about a fear of math? We've gone through this class several times. Who here has a fear of math?
Spelling.
Spelling, math, grammar.
Writing.
Yeah, so there really is no need to be afraid of math. The math that we do in this course and at the fireground is not very complicated. In fact, it's pretty easy, and the benefits from doing that math are huge. Huge. There's also this, there's the desire to not want to look like you don't know what you're doing. That's a big one. I mean, we've all been in that boat before where you don't want to be that person who, is the person who doesn't know what they're doing. I think we're in a shift that is pretty open with everybody. We're comfortable talking to each other. If you don't understand something, it's pretty easy to just say, hey man, you know what? I don't understand that. It's okay, we'll figure it out and we'll take care of it, right? So there's no reason to feel like you don't know what you're doing, just ask. Who is the most important person on the fireground? This is a new photo, by the way. It's our buddy there, Dave Dasick, veteran firefighter. Who is the most important person on the fireground? And it's not Dave specifically.
Pump operator.
That's right, it's the pump operator. And why?
He's getting the water.
He's getting the water because nothing else is going to go well unless water gets to the scene. We have our chiefs, we have our battalion chiefs, we have our officers. They can do all they want to do, but unless the right amount of water at the right pressure in a safe period of time, in a acceptable period of time, if that stuff does not happen, then things can go bad. So that's why the pump operator is the most important. Are you comfortable with whoever is the pump operator today? Who's our pump operator today? Oh man, so Randy Glass is the most important firefighter working today. Pretty good, huh? How do we feel about that?
Well, if there's cardiovascular involved, probably not.
Luckily, he doesn't have to be on a treadmill when he's operating the. All right, the golden truth, and I've used this phrase, reworded it here and there, but the fact of the matter is that there's a difference between being the pump operator, being assigned the pump operator, and being a good pump operator. And the idea of this course is that we create guys who are good at what they do. You know, this is a craft. This is your job. You should feel like you want to be as good as you possibly can at this particular task, right? So the intent of the course is to make sure that you're not just being the guy assigned, is that eventually you're growing to be a good pump operator. Okay, we can learn from experience because let's ask this question. How many times have you been a pump operator at a structure fire in the past 10 years? Raise your hand if you more than once. More than twice. More than 3 times, right? It's few and far between, right? In fact, every single fireground task that has to happen, you've probably, you can't do every single fireground task when you get to the scene of fire. You're not going to do ventilation, you're not going to do fire attack, you're not going to be the incident commander, you're not going to be the pump operator, you're not going to have all those tasks. Each person has to do one of those. And for you to get your turn at each specific assignment, it's going to take time. And of course, this one is the most important one. And the time frame in between when you do it once and when you do it again can be very significant. So we need to do stuff that gets us the ability to learn from experience. One of those things is the, in your folders, the pump operator post-incident review. That is a good way to learn from other guys' experiences as the pump operator, okay? I have those somewhere. I got to make them more public, but we do have several of those that have been filled out over the years. I'm not going to divulge too much time into this because I've talked about this case a lot. This particular case is extremely important to our job because there's a lot of things that happened at the Charleston Sofa Superstore fire that affected a lot of parts of our job. I think the big one here is when we talk about pump operations is the fact that they laid 1,850 feet of 2.5-inch hose as a supply line. Now, right now, today, do you think that you would be in a position where you would lay 1,850 feet of 2.5 as a supply line?
No.
Yeah. Why do you think that happened? This is Charleston, right? They have, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 stations, older community, good amount of fires. What happened?
They were set in their ways.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. They handled every single fire the same way. They've always laid 2.5-inch hose. And it's probably worked. I can see how it would work at a regular structure fire at 2.5. I guess it would work, for the most part, for a room and contents fire.
It was no different than what we were doing. When
Really? That's right.
With
We were doing 3-inch. So we have that same thing, right? So I'm just going to say that without getting into too much detail here on this, just remember that sometimes things change, the situation is different, and the reason we train, the reason we practice, the reason we have this class is to prevent things like this from happening. All right, the stuff that's going to be covered in this presentation is in your thing. You have that already. Those are things that are not covered. All right, so know your equipment. We'll start with double deuce up on top. Who makes that truck? Pierce, right? I forget if it's what the chassis is called, but it's Pierce. Who's the manufacturer of the pump? Waterous. Okay. What's the tank size? 22.
500.
500. Good. The pump capacity? 1500. What type of pressure relief valve does it have?
Pressure governor.
Pressure governor. Okay. What about Bank de Uno? That's 21 in Spanish.
Bilingual.
I told him, totally fine.
Also Pierce.
It's a Pierce, correct?
500.
Manufacturer of the pump?
Manufacturer is the Waterous.
Waterous, good.
Tank size.
Tank size? 500, good. Pump
1500.
capacity, 1500. Pressure relief type?
Yeah.
Pressure relief valve,
Yeah.
okay? 31, manufacturer of the truck,
Is it American France?
American LaFrance, right? Tank size,
290.
290 about, or 300, whatever, all those are acceptable. The pump capacity, 1500, and the pressure relief type, pressure relief valve, okay? All right, how about knowing your area? How well do you think you know your area, our response area, as the pump operator, from the pump operator's point of view? Do you know what the water supply is for, or how we get water supply in non-hydrated areas? Where are those areas? Where are the non-hydranted areas in the city?
Webster Road,
Webster Road,
Old Oak.
Old Oak for a
Oh,
little bit.
I'm sorry, yeah, Old Oak, Angle, I believe, right, by Falls there.
Yeah.
Also.
Right.
Um,
Well, Fowles down by Eastland.
by Eastland.
Right.
But there's that long distance
Yes.
between the railroad tracks and
Right, there's that spot there.
Main.
Main Street, but there's no
Farther
houses
down,
there,
right.
but right, but there's no hydrants there. Okay, so those are big. You know, you start headed to those areas, you're going to have quite the challenge for you when it comes to the water supply. What about static sources of water that we could draft from? Where would those be?
Angle Lake Business Park.
Yeah, that's the big one, right? We'll leave it at that. That was probably the place where we did that training that one day. So that's one of the big places. But of course, there's a lot of different sources.
Did you use the Middleburg Heights pool? Would you ever consider using that?
Why not?
That's
I'm not sure if we'd have enough
Did you get
dry
close enough?
suction close enough,
Yeah,
but
suction. We drafted off the Southeastern Road Bridge.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the first time we ever did it was off that bridge. Yeah. That's actually a pretty good place. I forgot about that.
Did we ever put a wet, dry hydrant in for drafting off of, by Angle Road Park over there? I thought we did.
Was there? Did we
I
really?
thought we were going to or something.
That'd be great.
I was just over there, I didn't see anything.
No. No?
I was getting those pallets from Bad.
Okay.
It was awesome, by the way.
All right. Maps. Remember, maps is part of our maps and responding is part of the components to the pump operations program. Do you know where you are going?
Not really. Most of the time.
We all have brain farts, do we not? Right? There's just going to be those times where you get caught and you're like, man, I don't know where the hell Craigmere is. Anybody heard of that street? Craigmere? Anybody?
It's not Middleburg.
I think it's in Strongsville?
Yeah.
I don't know. Right? Studying the map on a regular basis is obviously very helpful. We all know where the single-family homes are, commercial. So this is kind of basically directing you. Once the address comes in, if you have a visual of what is in that area, okay, or what potentially could be in that area. All right, so know your SOPs. Do we have any SOPs that are specifically designated for pump operations? Not really. I mean, there's some stuff that talk about it in some of the SOPs, but there's not one that specifically says pump operations SOP. So some past practice may apply. Who's getting the hydrant? In a 6-man day, who's getting the hydrant?
You jump over there. Or the cook.
Guy
The
behind
driver.
the driver.
Behind the driver.
Okay, behind the driver, good. Minimum. Do we have minimum flow rates? Not really. We don't have a departmental minimum flow rate. But some departments do that. They have a minimum, their SOP says that you will flow a minimum amount of water and then whatever it is. Who's taking the nozzle? As a pump operator, they may not be your #1 priority, but this is just a list of things that we need to practice on and we need to get comfortable with so that everybody knows exactly what's happening. Who's pumping into the standpipe? Are you using LDH or smaller? Are you getting a forward or reverse lay? Or a hand lay, right? We're not going to get into that. Everyone's comfortable with how the pump works, right? We know how the pump works. It's drive shaft, collar. Collar comes off the drive shaft, engages the pump, put it in drive. Is that satisfactory?
That's all right.
All right. Let me go back one here. All right, so every pump has this plate on this, right? This is a pump plate, whatever you want to call it. Every pump can flow. Pumps are tested at draft, Okay, so when the pump is tested to find out how much water can flow, they put a hose in some sort of pond, pool, whatever it is, and they draft water, and that's how they determine how much water the truck can flow. So does that mean that the numbers on here, what does it say? So 1,510, is that the maximum water? Is that the maximum amount of water that 22, 21, or 31 could pump?
No.
Do we agree?
Yes.
That's right, it's not. Remember, this is at draft, so the pump can actually produce more water, 4 gallons per minute, if it gets water under pressure, either from a hydrant, from a draft, or from a relay, and then it'll pump more. Okay? So what is net pump pressure? This is kind of tying into what I just talked about, right?
That's
Static
total.
pressure,
Go ahead.
and it's minus your, what's the
Yeah,
formula?
pull out. Go ahead and pull out your
Total engine pressure minus residual pressure.
minus
Static.
discharge pressure.
Discharge.
Yeah,
Total
okay.
engine pressure. Right? Which would
Discharge
be
minus,
right.
yeah. Minus your intake.
Right.
Remember, this is on your pump chart. So if you forget what it is, right? And what is this number telling you? If you were to do this, what is it telling you?
How much the pump's actually putting.
How much the pump is actually doing, right? Now, if you do your math, and in the process of doing your math, the number you get is higher than 150, what is that telling you?
What's the question?
So let's say you do your math. Let's go do a problem here. What does it say? What is the formula? Net pump pressure.
Discharge minus intake.
Right, so discharge minus intake. This is one of those math things that is incredibly important to know, right? So your discharge is like 180 and your intake is 90. What's your net pump pressure?
$90.
90. And what does that mean? All right, my net pump pressure is 90. Now what?
That's what the pump is actually adding to the incoming pressure.
Right, so if we throttle up, would we get more water?
Yes.
Yes, provided the residual doesn't drop below 20. Okay, so that's huge, right? Instead of being instead of being the pump operator being requested for water, you just throttle up without doing that. Well, like, I don't know what's going to happen, right? This tells you what's going to happen, okay, or what should happen. All right, here we did the example.
Do we have a single stage or dual stage pump?
Single stage.
Single stage. Dual stage pumps are pumps that have basically 2 impellers in it. We have 1 impeller. All right, so prior to responding, so here's what you want to do. You're the pump operator, and prior to responding, you get a call. Sounds like it could be a working fire, maybe it's an alarm, whatever the case is. First thing you want to do is what?
Get the address.
Confirm the address, right? Where is it? Where are we going? Is it a business? Is it a residential? What do they say? Because of course dispatch is always incredibly clear over the PA, right? You can understand every word they're saying. So confirm the address, right? Next thing you want to do is what? Determine the location of the nearest hydrant. And are you going to do a forward lay, a reverse lay, or a hand lay? Right? What's a hand lay, by the way?
So you pull it right off the truck.
Pull, yeah, you're not doing a forward, you're not doing a reverse, you just stop and you're just taking a hand lay and hand laying it in, right? So how would you determine this? How would you determine where the nearest hydrant is?
On the map.
On the map, yeah.
Map.
Tough question, tough question, tough question. And then just check for secondary sources of water. So the next nearest hydrant, maybe there's a pond of some sort. I don't know how you would tell that unless you just know where the area. All right, so those are 3 things you need to check for. The next 2 things here, as you're responding, right, is to remember what your 2 key size-up points are, which are what? Water supply, flow rate. Open your folders. Pull out the sheet. right here. This is incredibly important. So pull it up, hold it in the air, turn it around, look at it, give it a big hug. Randy, you don't seem to look you're participating.
Too much for him. Catch your breath.
You don't want to participate, right?
I like it.
This paper and these two words are incredibly important because they are guiding you in your response to the scene. Where is my water coming from? How much water do I need to deliver? Those are the things you need to be asking yourself. Your size up is different than the incident commander, than the guys that are on the attack line. You need to know how much water you're going to need to supply and where your water is coming from. Okay? Not that the other size of points aren't important, life safety, etc., but these are for you. Okay. Here are the steps we're going to follow as we continue through this presentation. There's about 10 of them. The first one we're going to talk about is positioning the vehicle. Shouldn't be too difficult. All right, the vehicle positioning is not incredibly difficult, but the vehicle positioning, where we're coming from, is going to determine whether or not we're doing forward lays, whether or not we're doing reverse lays, or whether or not we're going to do a hand lay, right? In this situation, this is the house that's on fire. Here's the supply, or the hydrant. We're coming this way. This would be clearly a situation where we would forward lay into the scene. Again, who's getting out?
Firefighter behind the driver.
That's right, firefighter behind the driver. And then what happens?
Well, he's supposed to get back in.
He should get back in, but I don't know if this has been happening the last fire that we were on. Is that what happened the last fire? I can't remember.
No,
I don't think that's what happened.
no. Specifically did not.
Yeah.
It's because the guy didn't get back in.
I'm not talking about
Still
that.
sticking
I'm
out.
not
Turn the
talking about
camera,
that.
I know certain things.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the call on Old Pleasant Valley. Because we did lay in.
Yeah, we did it that way.
Okay, did they get back in the truck?
Yeah, I believe we did.
Okay.
I think you got out at that point, though.
Yeah. But they did get back in the truck and we drove up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember driving over to the hydrant side.
Okay.
He caught it, got back in.
And for some reason, the last two fires, the hydrant's always been on the opposite side down the street. But, okay. So just keep that in mind. The idea is that he's getting out, wrap, get back in. Okay? Who finishes that?
Squad driver.
Squad driver. Okay.
I think it was a trick question.
Has anybody ever done anything but a forward lay or hand lay? This is a reverse lay, right? What is a reverse lay?
Drop the stuff.
If you're gonna do a legitimate reverse lay, the way it's supposed to be, what happens?
Drop the attack line off there, and then you back it up.
Right, so the truck's gonna come here, and then stop right here, the attack line's gonna come off, and the other equipment's gonna come off, and then the engine's gonna move towards the hydrant, or whatever the water supply is. Boom. What's the benefit of this? I don't know, I really don't see any.
Shorter supply line, I guess.
But it
Yeah,
gets water, it gets.
increases the attack line.
Yeah, I think this is a ridiculous concept. I mean, you will have, the attack line will be stretched, but you gotta wait for the truck to stop before they can engage the truck, so I don't know why I don't even know why this is a thing. All right, a hand lay, all right? So a hand lay is where we've pulled up to the scene and the truck is gonna stop basically because the hydrant is close to the building that's on fire, right? When you're doing this, so you're the pump operator, you're the driver, what you don't want to do is line up the center of the pump panel with the hydrant. You either wanna be somewhat before or somewhat after. And why is that?
You can flake it out a little bit.
Yeah, you don't want it to bend, right? We don't want any bends or kinks or anything like that, because those are one of our biggest obstacles to flow is kinking. So a little bit shorter, a little bit past, but don't line it right up. That way it gives room for the hose to lay out. All right, communications. What sort of communications need to be done if you're the pump operator?
when the hydrant's ready to flow,
All right, and how do we do that?
call for water, well, we'll be dropping the tank early.
Okay,
So I would try to monitor with the person at the hydrant, say, hey, 22 is ready for water.
okay.
Let me know when it's coming.
When is the pump operating for water?
When the pump operator is ready.
Yeah, but what dictates that the pump operator is ready?
Supply lines checked on both ends.
On both ends, okay, what else?
Bleeders open.
The bleeder's open and the supply line is, the actual lever to control is open, right? Whether you're using the 3-inch or the piston intake valve, those are your key points to make sure that those are complete before you say, go ahead and charge the line. All right, so some key points is to try to stay out of potential building collapse zones, should be obvious. Have an idea of how long your supply lines are. This is one that, like me personally, it's hard for me to remember how long our supply lines are. How much 5-inch do we have on 22? I want to say about 1,000, correct? 3-inch,
600.
we have one for 600?
600.
600? Just remember, as here it says, don't be nervous about pulling, too far past the building. We have plenty of hose for most of the stuff that we do. Even if we're a little bit further away than we should be, there's plenty of hose to make up for that distance. All right, so we've talked about step 1 is position the vehicle. Step 2 is actually engaging the pump, right? So when we engage the pump, when we're engaging the pump, all right, what do we want to do first?
Emergency brake,
Okay,
or set your parking brake rather.
what do we want to do before we pull the parking brake?
Put truck in neutral.
Neutral. Yeah, we gotta make sure that you're putting the parking, don't do it the other way, where you pull the parking brake first and then put it in neutral. We need to put it in neutral first and then apply the brake, okay? And why is that important?
Gears on mesh.
Yeah, the gears don't mesh. That's a good way to keep the gears from not meshing. Move the in-cab position, shift control from road to pump. We all know how to do that, right? On the air, how do we do it on the air control?
Pause for a brief second in the middle.
In the middle, and then all the way down. Okay. The electronic one, on 21, how do we engage the pump that way?
Flip the switch.
Flip the switch. All right, so after the pump shift is completed, you're gonna put the transmission in the proper operating gear, which is what gear?
E.
D, right? All right, the speedometer should read anywhere from 5 to 15, in that range, okay, 10 to 15. I'm not sure what the actual specific suggestion from the manufacturers, but you should get a reading on the miles per hour gauge, okay? If the shift does not get completed, what should you do?
What, I'm sorry?
If the shift is not completed, what should you do? For whatever reason.
Take it back out of the phone, put it back in neutral. And then you could try it again, and if that doesn't work, put it in reverse.
Okay. Do the old neutral, reverse, neutral, drive. Okay. How do we have confirmation that the truck is in pump gear while you're in the cab?
You would throttle up a little bit.
Throttle, good, so you can hear it. What else?
Speedometer,
Speedometer, good.
light,
How many lights?
1.
No.
One at the pump, one at the switch.
2 lights, right?
and
2
one
green
pump
lights,
panel.
right? What's the first green light?
It's inside the truck, drive. Yeah.
Right. That one confirms that the collar has moved from drive to pump. And then the second light tells you what? That the drive gear is actually engaged, okay? All right, then you can go ahead and exit the vehicle, and the first thing you want to do is to go ahead and chalk the wheels. Okay. Which wheels do we chalk?
Drive wheels.
The rear. All right, so step 1, we position the vehicle. Step 2, we've engaged the truck, put it in pump gear, and then we got to determine and establish our water supply. It's one of our size-up points. As we go through this, and then we're going through the practical part, the tank is going to be our primary source of water, right? So we're going to dump the tank. We should get in the habit that we're dumping the tank as we pull up. Right? Sometimes there's delays, right? Whatever the delay is, where you might actually get to the point where before you're flowing water from the tank, before the hose line is flowing water,
you may actually have everything connected, right? In that particular case, you can go ahead and just flow from the hydrant. But the default should be that we're starting from the tank and then we're gonna switch over to the hydrant, right? The switch over is gonna be another thing that we're gonna practice when we're doing our testing, okay? Then these are some other sources, tanker shuttle. Has anybody ever done a tanker shuttle? Tanker shuttles?
Yeah,
Yeah?
once it falls in Colby Station.
Yeah, okay, good, good, those are fun. Relays, anybody ever done a relay before? Yeah, we did a few of them here. A pod, so, and then you have the pond rotor static source. All right, so our friend, the tank, as it says here in step one, that's gonna be our initial choice. It provides for a steady source of water, but it doesn't last long. So if we're using 22, and we have a 500-gallon tank, and you're flowing 150 gallons per minute, which is what line? What line do we have that commonly goes 150?
Top speed limit, I believe. Or the rear, off the rear.
Right,
speed.
the adjustable gallonage, right? And then the new nozzles that we have, right? Flow 150 gallons, so on a 500-gallon tank, how long would that last? Approximately.
About 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes.
Okay, maybe we're in that range, so 150 is what? 300, so that's a 2-minute frame. And then maybe a little after that. So about 2 to 3 minutes is how long the tank would last if you're flowing steady 150 gallons per minute. Why is that 2 to 3 minute time frame important?
Because you gotta get a water supply.
Exactly, right? So that's going to be a key for you when you're doing your scenarios, is that you have 2 to 3 minutes, all right, after the line is charged, to get off the truck, go make your connection, and do all that stuff, okay? So what happens if you don't make it in 2 to 3 minutes?
The radio command.
You have interruption in your water supply.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad, right? So keep that time frame in mind. All right, so if you're operating from the tank, how does this work? How do we operate from the tank? Let's talk about it. Not reading the slide, how do we do this? Tank to pump, right, yeah, good stuff, good stuff. Tank to pump, and then what?
Ultimately, would you take your circulating valve?
Okay, excellent, that's a good point, right? Recirculating valve, it still needs to recirculate, right? What's next after that?
Mode.
Mode, what mode are we in?
We should put it in pressure.
PSI mode, right? Okay. All right, so that's good. When would we, what did I want to ask? Oh, when would we shut down the tank pump? When would we close it, or would we close it? Do you leave it open?
No, once you connect to your power supply.
You should do what to it?
Close it.
You should close it. Why should we, what difference does
Just
it make?
overflow your tank.
That may be, there should be a one-way valve on there that prevents it from overflowing. Right, what happens then? You're on the right path.
Reduce pressure. It's open, but pressure, well,
Right.
size it should be.
Well, if you're to lose water supply, what would happen?
You drain your tank without.
You would drain your tank without knowing it, right? And we don't want that to happen. We need to know that you have an emergency 500 gallons. If you filled it, right?
Well, you should see it on your intake too.
Right.
You should keep monitoring that for your
Right.
residual pressure.
Right.
So when you lose that, you should see that you would lose
That's
your,
true.
your supply.
Right.
So.
But if you had it, if you had it open, you really wouldn't know.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Is that one-way valve just on 22, right? There's
Yeah, not on 21. And I don't know about 31.
Yeah, I would say just on.
Yeah.
But they had told me there was a 3/4 inch hole in whatever, that's Rick Pugsley told me that, so.
What was that?
Well, we see how,
It'll still overflow.
yeah, we'll see how that guy is, how beneficial that guy is.
We charge $200.
Mhm.
Nice catch.
See that?
Yeah.
First try.
Bilingual.
I'm by, and I can catch back on the back.
Two in a row.
Skills. That I found the address for that.
They just want to schedule some kind of inspection or something, I don't know, Jan's not here.
Now we need to go over phone operations with someone.
Our administrative assistant Yeah, two. Yeah, if you try calling back maybe about three, she can help you. Okay, all right, thanks. Bye. All right, so we've opened the tank to pump. We're gonna shut it when we get a supply. Also, we're gonna do tank fill before, after we've established our supply. Hydrants are little buddies, right? They're typically our choice, right? The rates vary. How much water comes out of the standard Middleburg Heights hydrant?
GPMs,
Yeah.
1,500.
Anybody know? Anybody, a guess? How much water?
Pressure usually not the water supply.
What's that?
I know static pressure typically is not water supply.
Right, but what is static pressure? Is a relatively,
What is the number?
I mean,
It's right around 100 for most of our hydrants.
right, but static pressure to us is not a huge
Right.
informational number, right?
I just know that. I don't know.
We've done some testing here, it's right around I don't know what it is throughout the city, but you're right around 1,000 gallons per minute, in that range. 1,000, 1,100. All right, we talked about transition, we'll talk about that later. By the way, I gotta bring this up, since we are on transitioning from the tank to hydrant. On 22 with the pressure governor, should the pressure governor be in pressure mode or RPM mode when you're switching over from tank to hydrant?
Say RPM.
Anybody else?
Whatever Mike says, I go with that. He's smarter than me.
Anybody else? You guys have an opinion? What would you do today? You're the pump operator, what would you do? There is no real right or wrong
I'll be in
answer to
pressure.
it. The owner's manual says to have it in RPM mode, but I don't think you're necessarily wrong if you put it in PSI mode. We've tried to do testing on this to gauge whether or not incoming pressure, because what the manufacturer is saying is that the pressure governor is not designed to withstand the type of pressure that comes in from a hydrant. It can't do it. That's what Class 1 says. Class 1 is the company that makes our pressure governor, okay? So they're suggesting that you put it in RPM mode, throttle down a little bit. Once the supply is connected, you come back up. This creates a problem to me simply because, well, you're in PSI mode to begin with because you dumped the tank, right? Right, you dumped the tank, you're flowing line. What, were you in RPM mode when you did that? Okay, you could be because there's no real fear of a pressure spike, but then you have to switch it back. So if you put it in pressure mode to start, then you gotta get it in RPM mode, make the connection, and then put it in PSI mode. Well, what if you're one person? So you're the one that has to get up, then you gotta run over to the hydrant, make the connection, run back. There's really not a whole lot of time for you to do that. So what I'm gonna tell you is that either way is going to be acceptable until we have proof that one way is better than the other, okay? I would say it's very safe to leave it in PSI mode when you start the operation, leave it in PSI mode when you connect your supply line, and leave it in PSI mode once the supply line is connected, and you have your tank to pump shut. There will be a considerable pressure spike. There's not much you can do about that if you're the one running over to the hydrant to make the connection. You just have to be leery of that when you're up on the thing there, and incoming pressure is coming in. Is the pressure going to spike? Is there going to be an increase in pressure?
Yes.
Mhm.
There is. So you have to keep an eye on that. We really haven't seen it significantly impact what we've done here, but that's, using the hydrant over at the service or the water treatment plant, which is, dead end loop hydrant, how much pressure does that thing have? So I would tell you that the bottom line is leave it in PSI mode until further notice. Okay? Just remember, I guess I should bring this up. So if we're gonna talk about transitioning from tank to the hydrant, if we're gonna use 21 or 31, this is where we have to do some feathering in of the supply line, right?
So if we're using 21 and 31, let's just pretend we have a situation where we have a line out, right? Tank to pump is pulled, you're running off the tank, and you're about to connect your supply line, right? How would we do this?
Take one at the top and one at the bottom, and just kinda.
Right, so the tank to
Switch
pump would
positions.
start to come down, and then your intake would start to come open, okay? And that's basically how you do it, and you watch the gauge, and that's how it's done, all right? It takes practice, it takes a little feel to get that done, because it's kind of an awkward thing to do, you know? But we'll do that while we're doing our thing. Okay? All right, so remember, there is friction loss in supply lines. This goes back to the Charleston incident, right? All right, priming the pump. Is priming the pump always necessary?
You know,
Why not?
and we have a constant prime, well, we should have a constant prime on the pump, we have water in the pump.
There's water in the pump.
Water
Do we, you know, some departments during the winter will do what to the pump?
Make it a drain pump.
Drain it, right? We have never done that here, that I'm aware of, right? We don't drain the pump. Some departments do. In that case, then you would really have to be concerned about, you know, air getting into priming, okay? How do we prime the pump if necessary?
Full prime.
Yeah, a little primer, yeah. Who can imitate the primer noise the best?
Jason's good.
Jason's good. Well, what you got? Let me hear it.
I don't have a good example for it.
No. No fun. Right, so how long do we pull that for?
5 to 10 seconds, I believe.
You can do a little bit longer than that, maybe.
Until you hear the.
Yeah,
tone
until you
change.
hear it, right?
Change noise.
Which is a little bit different from when we're doing it for drafting, but that's another topic.
Can you also drop the tank and open the discharge?
Yeah, that would also do it. All right, on to step 4, where we're getting into some meat and potatoes. Or today, sloppy joes and tater tots of this class.
Baked beans.
And baked beans and bacon.
Coleslaw.
Right, and coleslaw, right. All right, so,
I love.
in order to properly set our discharge pressure, no matter what system you're using, you need 4 pieces of information. Those 4 pieces are right here. What are they?
Nozzle pressure.
I'm gonna guess friction loss.
Friction loss, Juice, good. What else?
Elevation.
Elevation, thank you. Device, man, this side of the room is paying attention. Great. 4 pieces of information: nozzle pressure, friction loss, elevation, and device. In fact, these 4 things that we're going to routinely ask ourselves every time you're going to set the discharge pressure. You're always going to say to myself, what's the nozzle pressure? What's the friction loss? What's the elevation loss? And what's the device loss? Even though these 2 things right here aren't very common, we're still going to go through the process and say to ourselves, what is the elevation loss? What is the device loss? All right, first things first. What's my flow rate? How do we know what the flow rate is for our nozzles?
That you should have known.
That's right, you should have those mesmerized. All right, so speaking of nozzles, to me, knowing the nozzles is akin to, I like that word, akin, is akin to knowing our ACLS stuff, right? Who loves ACLS? Mike loves ACLS, who else? Stumpy likes Amerodian. Right, so ACLS, every 2 years we have to get tested on ACLS, right? We have to memorize our dosage for this, our dosage for that, and that shit changes, right? Every few years it changes. The benefit to this is that these numbers do not change. These numbers will be exactly the same from today as they were yesterday, a year from now, whatever. These numbers won't change, okay? The operating pressures for these nozzles won't change. The flow rates will not change. So that should be some solace, right? That's pretty cool.
I can sleep with night.
Right. All right, when we talk about nozzle pressure, what we are talking about is the pressure we need right here to make this nozzle do what it's designed to do. So if we had a gauge, we could put the gauge there, and that gauge would read whatever the operating pressure is. So we need that number right here in order for this thing to work properly. All right, so the smooth bore fog nozzle debate. Who wants to get into this? Ooh. Who wants to do it? Randy, would you like to get into the smooth bore fog nozzle debate?
Not really.
How about moving it down?
A lot of honesty coming from the side of the room as well.
Yes.
All right, so each side has its good points and bad points. So my thing is that each one of these nozzles has an advantage, and there's also there's situations where each one of them may be better than the other. Okay? If you're going to do an indirect attack, fog nozzle may be good, right? Although in this day and age, when we're talking about modern fire behavior, what's the modern fire behavior suggestion? If you're going to do the attack from the outside, transitional, what do they want you to do?
Pretty much darken it down, cool it down.
With what though?
With water, smooth bore.
Smooth bore or straight stream. Okay, so they will take a straight stream from a fog nozzle. They'll take a straight stream from a smooth bore nozzle. Okay. For foam applications, a fog nozzle is much better. Okay, because remember what a fog nozzle does is it adds when the foam solution gets to the fog part. The fog part is what adds the air to it to make it foamy. Okay, we don't have a cast system or anything like that that would add air to it, so we're dependent on the fog nozzle to do it.
You trained him good, Mike, he's a good secretary.
Yes.
He's learning, slow, but he's good.
Where at? Okay. Done welding for the day at the elementary school. All right, thank you.
He looks
Okay.
angry.
Thank you. Yep. Bye. They are done welding at the elementary school, and they will continue their fire watch for another half hour.
I'm ecstatic. Okay. Standpipe operations, we know that standpipe operations are better done with a smooth bore nozzle, and why is that?
Debris in the possible standpipe, you get a little better reach.
Okay. What else?
Friction loss.
What else? What's kind of the key?
Lower pressure.
Lower pressure, right? 50 PSI versus 100. Exposure protection, obviously taking the deck gun and launching it at a residential house is at 500 some gallons at 100 PSI is
Sweet.
is like using a bomb to protect it. So fog would be a better choice there. So let your own personal experience dictate which one you'd use, but those are the guidelines, generally speaking. All right, so the first one is our smooth bore. Now typically I have these nozzles lined up here, but we've gone over this over and over again, so I think we kind of get an idea. But of course, the smooth bore, our flow rates are anywhere from 30 to 300 gallons per minute, and the minimum is 50 PSI. We're comfortable with that? If you don't remember what the flow rates are, those are at the top of your chart. Okay, so right here, which I'm sure everybody has mesmerized, right? Well, there's that. What about this bad boy? What's this?
Automatic.
Where's this thing at?
Basement.
In the basement where it belongs, right? So we're not going to be too concerned about that. What does an automatic nozzle do, by the way?
Just the pressure.
It adjusts the pressure, but why? To do what?
Keep your stream shaped.
To keep your stream looking like it's straight. But of course, what do you get when you do that?
Sacrifice GPM.
Exactly. Man, this room over here. Okay. What about this? This is our hardcore nozzle. What's this sucker?
That's the flow variable gallon.
Yeah, it's right here. You forgot. And why is it an adjustable gallonage constant flow nozzle? By the way, I always have to throw this in here. When I first started here, do you guys know what this was called?
Fog.
It was called the automatic nozzle. This was an automatic nozzle for like the first 5 years plus of my career. And you want to know why it was called an automatic nozzle? Because you can automatically change. Here's what it is. Okay, adjustable gallonage, constant flow. We know why it's adjustable gallonage. Click, 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 click. Why is it constant flow? what part of this nozzle makes it constant flow? What does that mean? What does that part mean?
It's always gonna flow that whether it's in straight stream or
Well,
flow.
there's, so, 150, 150, or whatever it's, yeah,
Shut up.
right? Click. That was good, that was good.
Got a little reaction. Someone likes my DJ.
All right, what about this bad boy?
That's
Turbo
The
jet.
Saber,
Saberjet.
Saberjet,
the
right?
Nemesis.
This is, hopefully been retired. I don't know if this thing is even on something anywhere. I think we took it off.
It's on,
Is it on 21?
21,
Yeah.
2.5 inch.
All right, so what's the issue with this nozzle? First of all, there's two things that we have to be concerned about, because there's a smoothbore aspect to this and a fog, right? The smoothbore flows how much,
210 gallons.
right? What about the fog? Where's that flow?
135.
Which is, I think, not enough. Okay, in my personal opinion, 135 gallons, it should not be an amount of water that we are flowing. And if you've ever seen the pattern on this thing, it's even at narrow, it's pretty wide when you're on fog. So, not super effective, garbage. All right, what about this? This is our new nozzle. Fixed pressure, fixed gallonage, also known as a low pressure fog. What's the benefit of this?
Breakaway.
pressure.
Breakaway and lower pressures, right? So we can almost get the same flows with about 25% less PSI. Plus they're less confusing, right? Straight up. One flow rate, one flow rate, one nozzle pressure. And what does this operate at? 75 PSI, right? The one thing not to forget here is the difference between, what was that?
51, 51. Come back, I think.
The thing that a lot of guys do is they kind of confuse PSI and the GPM part. So we just need to make sure that we're focusing on the operating pressure is in PSI, the flow rate is 100 gallons per minute. Master streams. Is their flow rates greater than 300, and what's the operating pressure for master streams? 80. What about this bad boy?
Blitz Creek.
What can you tell me about the Blitzway?
Just two pressure settings.
Master streams. Is their flow rates greater than 300, and what's the operating pressure for master streams?
80.
80. What about this bad boy?
Blitz Creek.
What can you tell me about the Blitzway?
Just two pressure settings. Low pressure setting and a high pressure setting.
Did he say a
Backer.
All right, we'll pause.
The guy was telling us M Haven, it turns out it's Elm Haven. So I got the address to that
Oh, you did?
place.
Oh,
But I already sent it, so
Okay.
when we're done, would you send it back to me?
Yeah.
Can I give it to you or whatever?
yeah, I'll send it back to you.
Okay. It's not a hippo thing, is it? Sure.
I think we'll survive.
Compliance officer.
And you still okay if I leave it 3 to get that stuff rolling?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I gotta go with him,
Yeah.
help with the bacon.
Right, yes.
Mixing
Burning,
it.
browning ground beef is very complicated,
Well, it's
very time
mixing it
consuming.
into the
Yeah,
meat.
yeah.
That's really, that's.
I gotta let it simmer, bro. You want good taste or you want bad taste?
Yeah, right. They just don't understand, like.
No, they
don't
don't.
understand. They just want good food. They
Yeah,
don't care.
yeah,
you know?
right.
We don't care how long it takes to get here.
No. Are you okay?
Scour the city for the freshest ingredients.
Yep.
All right, so back to the Blitzfire. So what did we say? It has it can operate at 2 operating pressures. That's the fog one, right?
as a high or low setting. Okay. What else? When would we use this thing?
Unmanned master stream.
Right, unmanned master stream, right? You don't have to man it, that's what unmanned is. It's not like the old monitors before, where you had to pull the piping off of the truck, or you had a separate one where you pick that heavy thing up and put it down. And
Ground monitor.
Yeah, the ground monitors, I couldn't think of the name.
Driving
right?
states.
That is some work, okay? What's the flow rate for this?
For the fog portion,
Yeah.
or?
See if it's in your chart.
Flow rate 464,
That's for the,
inch and a quarter.
yeah. So we're gonna get more into this later on, but I just want to at least defibrillate your memories a little bit on the Blitz fire. Remember, you do have a chart down here for it. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but there is a chart on your thing, and you also have a handout in it that kind of goes over the Blitz fire. But we will get into this more up on the drill ground. All right, so how do we determine friction loss?
You got our handy dandy chart here.
All right, so you have the chart. What other ways could we determine friction loss?
Slide chart,
Slide chart,
calculator,
calculator,
Abacus,
abacus,
Take a guess.
fingers and
take
toes.
a guess.
Fingers and toes.
Right. There's a lot of ways to do it. Who is using the pump chart as their primary?
This one?
Yeah.
I use it.
2, 3. What about you two cats?
I like the slide
Okay.
rule.
So you're the slide rule guy, okay? Whatever system works for you, as long as you're comfortable using it. I do have the pocket calculator here. We're gonna play with the pocket calculator.
If you're a straight up nerd.
This does work, so I honestly have never used this at a fire scene before, so I would assume that it works.
It's solar, so like hopefully you have
yeah,
daylight and you can use it.
So this is an option, but this thing is cool. It can give you, if you really wanted to, you can get back pressure or things like that if you're trying to set up lines ahead of time. So,
Square root of.
yeah, reaction force. Right?
Right.
So that's what this thing is. If you want to play with this, feel free. There's that. So those are a couple ways. Those are a couple things you could use. But we're going to focus more on the pump chart since that's what most of the guys are using. We do have pump operation friction loss formulas. If somebody really wants to do that, they can go ahead. We're not going to. Blah, blah, blah. Slide calculator. We're not going to really get into the slide. What we are going to do is get into the pump chart. All right. So if we pull the pump chart out, tell me about this pump chart. Who can tell me something cool about the pump?
Bunch of numbers.
A lot of numbers out there. What is the top part of the pump chart tells us what? Flow rates for
Smooth
Nozzles.
smoothbore nozzles, right? So if you don't know, or if you don't remember what the flow rate of a particular nozzle is, that's where you would start, at the top. So if you do know what the flow rate is, what would you do then? Come down to the bottom part, right? All right, good.
Your extra supply. Your,
Well, then what size hose?
Right. So what about the stuff on the right side? What is all that?
It's our formulas for the remaining hydrant flow
Good.
and pump net pressure.
Okay, so what the pump chart does that the slide rule does not do is at least it gives you some of this information so that at some point if you were not to remember, how to figure out that pump pressure, how to determine remaining water in the hydrant, at least this has those formulas on there so that you can refresh your memory. If you're using the slide rule or you're using the calculator, you would have to either have those numbers memorized or another way to pull up that information. So that's why I think that the pump chart is good, because it has this extra stuff on here. And if you wanted to make your own pump chart, you can do that and add any other information that you would feel is pertinent. Okay, on the left there, and I did download this, there is a app now that you can download through Waterous. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Sorry, I'm not prepared
Super
here.
nerd, I think it is.
It is called the Waterous Tech Tool. So if you wanted to, you could download the Waterous Tech Tool. It's basically the basic functions of that calculator in an app. It is free. There's a lot of other things on here that you can spend plenty of hours on the grapper playing with, but it is an option. Okay. You're not going to download it? With next to your hazmat apps?
I'm only asking.
All right, so elevation loss. How do we determine elevation loss? Either up or down.
5 per 10 feet.
5 psi for every 10 feet, right? Or 10 feet down, 10 feet up. Okay. Do we count the first floor? So if we're going to the second floor, would we count the first floor, or would we just count the second floor? So it would be 5 psi for, did you say 5 or 10? 5 psi for every 10, right?
Right.
Yeah, so if you're going to the second floor, would you count the first floor, or would you just start with your 5?
Count the first floor.
So you count it, if you're going up to 10 feet.
Yeah.
Not necessary, you would count just
The second.
the second floor, okay?
So you're still going up 5 though?
Right, you're still going up 5, but if you're on the second floor, it's not 10 psi, it's
Yeah.
5 psi.
That's what I
Is it that big of a deal?
Because
Not
you're
really,
counting
but
the
some
first
people
floor
are.
is the 10 feet, yes?
Oh, boy.
Technically?
I agree.
Just go a long way, like you were.
All right, device loss. What is that?
Friction loss caused by devices.
Correct. That's not too complicated, right? How would we determine this?
Should it's set from the factory, they'll tell you.
Most of the stuff is set from the factory, basically, right? But sometimes you kind of have to just make things up. Through some experience, we're able to determine some things. For example, the piping through
Truck.
the piping through the deluge gun is usually about 20 psi for 500 gallons per minute. So, very simply put, if you're going to flow 502 gallons per minute from the deluge gun or the deck gun, whatever you want to call it, you got to be at least at 100 psi. Okay? Now, when we talk about device loss, you'll see it in your handout for 31's hydraulics. So go ahead and pull that out for a second, just so, because sometimes device loss gets lost in our calculations because it doesn't usually come up. But I want you to pull this out for a second, if I can find it. Should be on the third page at the bottom. For flows up to 1,000 gallons per minute, you should be using at least 25 psi. Okay? What does the next sentence say?
Greater than 1,050.
50 psi. That is a lot of device loss. Okay? I went over to 31 to just kind of follow the pathway of water. You know, every time that there's a bend in that system, that's where the device loss kicks in. And there's quite a bit of it. There's quite a few bends. I want to say I counted a dozen different bends from the time the water gets from the platform up to where it gets to the bucket. So these are key numbers that we probably have not been adding to our friction losses when it comes to elevation for master streams. 25 psi for up to 1,000, more than 1,000, 50 psi. There's a lot of friction loss, but in order to get the flow rates that we need. Okay? All right. All right, so we're going to do some practice problems. I have to make these up as I go. Let's see. Let's say, now, oh, by the way, as we're doing these, what is the time frame that it should be taking you to determine these?
30 seconds or less.
Bingo, right? 30 seconds or less. It needs to be that quick, right? So let's say that you are the pump operator today, and
Randy.
which is Randy. Yeah, Randy's pump
So
operator.
only Randy should have to figure this problem out. I'm just saying.
Let's say you are working with 1 3/4 hose with an adjustable gallonage nozzle. You have it set at 150 GPMs. You read that? And you got, let's say, 200 feet of hose. No elevation, no device. And go.
Yeah, 160.
Nice. Really good. 160. Okay? Let's say,
You wanna use your phone?
No, I did it a while ago, didn't I? Someone else was still thinking I still.
He divided his weight by
Did I do it
2.
wrong?
How's this? I never used this one before.
Your penis?
so, if you go here to engine pressure,
Wait, you have to go to engine
yeah,
pressure?
you press engine pressure, and then it'll prompt you for the answer. So nozzle pressure, you type in what the nozzle pressure is,
Okay.
then hit enter, and then you would cycle through all the questions.
Okay.
All right, so let's say we have a 1-inch smooth bore attached to 250 feet of 2.5. And we're on the second floor of a worker. No device loss. And go.
250 feet? What, 2.5?
67.
Randy says 67.
Ish. Say around
This
78. 59. 68.
75 PSI.
What size hole? 2.5?
Yeah, 250 feet, 75 PSI.
About 75.
How many? How much?
75.
Two?
250 feet of 2.5.
250. Oh, okay. Sorry, I did 200.
Anybody else said anything different? Like right around there, 75?
Right around there.
Okay.
20 pounds of friction loss, 5 for the elevation, 50 for the nozzle pressure.
Let's see. You're using the adjustable gallonage set at 200 GPMs, 200 feet of 2-inch, no elevation, no device.
148.
Agreed.
Good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Shit is good. All right. Is that complicated right now? Are we having issues with that?
Most definitely.
Are you seriously? No. We're comfortable doing this? I think you guys were, that was fast.
Pretty straightforward. We
Sure.
got the numbers, just plug them in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're leaving the nest.
All right, net pump pressure. Let's do some net pump pressure, even though we already did this. Jason is the pump operator today. Jason is working the pumps at a fire at Sears.
Ooh,
Shit.
bad day.
Ooh.
Bad day at Sears number, dude.
Fire at the old Sears.
You know where that's at?
Right? So there's a fire at the old Sears. The discharge pressure is 120. His residual is 80. Oscar has just asked for more water. Will an increase in the throttle result in an increase in water, all things being equal?
So yes.
Jim has come over to the pump and helped
What am I
Jason?
figuring out? The
Oh,
Did-
boy.
net
Net
pump
pump
pressure
pressure.
should be 40, right?
Okay,
120 minus 80.
40.
Yeah.
So the net pump pressure is 40. What does that mean?
You got more water to
I
get.
do have water.
You have more water, but what is 40? That's how much work
The pump is
the
adding.
pump is actually adding, okay? He can go up to what?
150.
150 without losing flow. Okay?
What do we talk about Mojo?
Randy is the pump operator.
Guess nothing.
Crickets.
Randy is the pump operator. Randy is working a fire at Goodwill.
Just let it burn.
You know where that is?
A lot of stuff. You know where that is, Goodwill?
Smell coming off that place would be pretty strong.
The discharge is reading 170. The intake is reading 20. Will an increase in throttle result in an increase in flow?
150. So yeah, we want to say yes.
What's the answer?
No.
No. Could damage the pump.
Yeah,
Your max.
we're right at 150, you're at the max.
I thought we had the subtraction, it's 170 minus
The intake.
the intake. We'll put us at 150 then.
Right, and what is the max for,
150.
is 150?
Looks like Jim's moving over the pump.
You understand what that means?
No, it wasn't really, because earlier you said as long as we were above, never mind.
20.
Above
Good.
20.
No.
That's residual,
That was residual.
right. I kind of trick you a little bit by using the residual pressure, but what I'm saying is that an increase in throttle, I want you to focus at 150. You wouldn't have done it anyhow because you're at 20 here, but an increase in the throttle would result in a decrease in flow. When would we want to go above? Is there any time where we'd want to go above that 150 mark? There is one scenario.
What's wrong with having the residual not going below 10?
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're at 20.
Right.
It's like.
Fluctuations.
I've pumped on scenes in the past years that my residual is 10.
Incredibly dangerous.
No
Because
cushion.
of fluctuations in the water system, you are incredibly close to not only damaging the pump, but if there is any type of decrease in the water supply elsewhere, you're gonna damage the pump, and you're also gonna damage the hydrant, you're gonna damage the water line, and you would actually shut down the entire operation if that were to happen. So you need some leeway in between this number and 0, which is cavitation, right? Because 0 is cavitation, right? Or right at cavitation.
But what I'm saying, okay, you're.
I'm not saying you can't. You could be at 1. You could be at 1 and
Right,
still be
but what I'm
totally
saying
fine.
is, you're telling us 20, but if you needed more water, yeah, Randy can actually give you a little bit more without going below the 10 residual.
You're right, but you're risking cavitation and damaging the entire system and shutting the operation down. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't want to take that risk.
The safety factor.
There's the safety factor in there. Do you want to be, if you're a high angle rescue guy, do you want to be on the rope that has no safety factor in it? Or do you want some safety factor involved? We're gonna address that situation in a little bit, what you would do, but you don't wanna mess with that. There's no reason to, what do you care? Really, and in most situations, that's a defensive operation anyhow.
Yeah.
When you're getting down to this, you're flowing a lot of water. What do you care whether the building burns down? We don't care, we just don't want the fire to spread elsewhere. That's our focus. So,
We'll have to get another pump in.
yeah. Okay. All right, we already did this. How much can that hydrant flow? How do we determine how much the hydrant can flow?
Pitot gauge? Let's think.
Well, with what we have, the information that we have. Yes, that would be, if you're gonna do flow testing, yes. How can we determine how much water we have left in the hydrant? If you're the pump operator and you're working on a scene.
Static pressure minus residual divided by static.
Yeah, there you go. We use the formula that's on your piece of paper right here, right? Why is this important? When would this come up?
You wanna add
If
another
you
line?
want another line.
If you want another line, right? What have we done in the past? All right, charge it. Hopefully nothing happens, right? But there should be some educated guesswork to this instead of being, I don't know, let's take 5 minutes, stretch the line out, open it up, and hopefully we're good. But we don't want to do that, right? We want to do it this way. So let's practice this, because this is a key. Now, I'll let you know that if you can't do this during your testing, you'll fail. And we don't want people to fail. The idea is to pass and be comfortable with this. You have the formula directly in front of you, so even if you don't remember what it is, it's right there, okay? So let's go over this. Pretty sure I'm a little off here. Okay. Good, I thought we would do earlier. So, let's see. Let's say you are flowing, it doesn't really matter specifically what you're flowing. Let's pretend that we're flowing 350 gallons of water. Through whatever combination, 1 line, 2 lines, 1,000 lines, whatever it is. You're flowing 350 gallons per minute. Okay? So your discharge gauge is reading, let's say it's reading 130. So that's your discharge gauge. Your residual, which is on what side? What side is the gauge?
Left.
The left. Let's say that's reading 50. All right. Can you flow, or how much water is left in the hydrant?
What's your static pressure initially?
Static was 80.
Cannot.
Now, let's put these numbers into context, right? How did we get the static pressure?
Just looking at it with no water flowing.
With no water flowing. When did you get that number?
Hopefully when the line was shut down.
Right at the beginning or when the line is shut down. So you may not always have this number. Don't confuse this number with the discharge. All right, so that's why this number is up here. You don't care about this, okay? Static, residual. All right, so let me do the math here so I can catch up.
79.3.
What?
What?
I think your abacus is off.
Yeah.
No?
You should have either 0 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20 static.
Static
I'll show you here in a second.
minus
Residual.
Divided by static.
Divided by static.
Divided by static. Okay. What's the static pressure?
80.
80. What's the residual?
50.
50.
What's that?
30.
30. Divided by the static is what?
80.
Static was what, 80?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
30 divided by 80 gets you what?
0.375.
Yep.
Point what?
0.375.
0.375.
Right.
What does your chart tell you that means?
No.
You can't,
Right, and how do we know that?
because we're
Above 25.
Above 25. Okay? So you cannot flow, at least you can't flow 350. That's what this is telling you. Theoretically, you may be able to flow numbers under that, but we know you can't flow 350. Okay? Let's try another one. Something more realistic. All right, let's say you're flowing 150 gallons per minute, which is probably 1 line. And your static pressure was 60. You checked your residual pressure, which is which gauge?
left.
On left. Yeah, good. Residual pressure is 30. Let's see what that happens then.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do we get?
0.5.
0.5, so way outside, right? All right, let's tighten this up a little bit, let's do it differently. Let's say your static is, or was, 100, and your residual is 90. Same thing.
Do 3 or more.
What'd you get when you did the math? 0.1, which is equals what, 10%?
Mhm.
What does that say?
3 or more.
So how much water is left? How much water is left? 3 equal lines,
Probably 450 gallons.
450
Oh, the
gallons.
same 150, okay.
Yep.
I can catch up.
This is why you need to run, you need to know how much you're flowing, so it's however many equal lines. Let's try. So you're flowing 125 gallons per minute. This is 110. Let's try that. That's what happens there. How many more equal lines, or can we do any more equal lines?
Yeah.
One.
One. So how much more water do we have?
125.
125 gallons. Confusing? Good?
Just something you gotta go over regularly.
You have to go over this, because the tricky part here is remembering that it's how many equal flows. Okay, so you have to know what your flow rate is, and however many equal flows. It's either gonna be 3 more equal flows, 2 more equal flows, or 1.
Or not.
Or none, sure, I forgot about that option. Okay? Something you can practice on when you're the pump operator, I would say give yourself your own scenario in the morning. After you're checking everything that you check, throw one of these scenarios at you and just see if you're comfortable, you know. All right.
I know.
All right, so back at it.
Yes.
Operating the relief valve. We're starting off talking about the relief valve on 21.
Okay.
What does the relief valve do, by the way?
It's like a dampener against pressure spikes.
Okay. And where does that water go?
Jason, we just went over this.
Back into the tank.
No?
What else? Someplace,
Back into the intake,
or the-
okay?
That's what I meant.
All right. Some common misconceptions about the relief valve. The valve does not dump water onto the ground, okay, so there's one thing. On 21 and 31, the spring, if you're gonna set that, there is no memory that occurs when that spring is set. The control knob should, however, not be all the way to the left at the lowest pressure. It should be left right around whatever the normal operating pressures are that you're gonna use. There's 2 types of relief valves. Remember, there's an intake relief valve on the intake side of the pump, and there's also a discharge relief valve. Okay? Except on 22, where there is no discharge relief valve, there's only an intake relief valve. 22 has a pressure governor. Okay. This is the actual pilot valve that controls the relief valve. We call it the relief valve. The relief valve itself is the valve that's in the piping that opens up once an increase in pressure occurs. Again, this is the pilot valve on a Hale. The pilot valve that I showed you before is the pilot valve on a Waters. All right, so before you set the relief valve, there has to be a 50 PSI differential between the intake and the discharge, right? If your required discharge pressure is below 90, the relief valve will not work. So in that first scenario that I gave you for the pump relief, the discharge pressure one, that was like 70 or something, that scenario, you would not be able to use the relief valve. And you should have multiple lines flowing in order to get the relief valve to work properly. One of those can be the tamp fill. Right. All right, if I were to sit here and go over how the relief valve works in talking about it, I think it's a lot easier to actually go and do it, which is what we'll do again when we go back onto the fairground. However, give me a general idea of how you would set the relief valve. This would be on 21 and 31. Okay? How do we generally speaking, how do we set that valve?
You have to have water flowing,
Okay, we have to have water flowing.
to be turned on.
Turn it on. On a hail, do we have to turn it on?
No,
Why?
because it's always on.
It's always on. Okay. Next.
Then you would, the relief valve should maybe possibly say it's open right now, or you
Okay.
should turn it so it is open. And then you're gonna turn it slowly until you see that the valve closed. Now,
Well, we gotta do something else first. Right? We have to be at our operating pressure, correct? Okay? So whatever we set the discharge valve to, that has to be done, and then we can go ahead and set the relief valve, right? All right, so if, through whatever math that we use in our charts and stuff, we come up with a discharge pressure of 150, okay? That's what we set our gauge to. All right, so now we're ready to do the relief valve. Okay, we've turned it on, right, now what? We've turned it on, let's say we're on 21, we've turned it on, it says closed,
Okay, so we want to turn it till it opens,
okay?
so we kind of get the balance of it. So it's open now, so now I'm going to turn it again, I believe it's clockwise, until it closes.
Well, what do we need to set the relief valve to, first of all?
A little higher.
A little higher, right? Because if you set it at 150, what's gonna happen? It's gonna open. So we wanna set it to a little bit higher, right? You understand why? So we have a little bit of leverage there. So you'd set it to like 155. All right, so you throttle up to what? 155. So far, so good?
Well, couldn't you just turn it until it closes and then go a half a turn?
But you're not
to
at, you're at
3/4 turn?
150 though, when you do that.
Yeah, but it closed at 150. so
But you
then
don't want it to open at
So then
150.
you turn it another additional half to 3/4 of a turn. So that should put it up a little higher than 150.
Not necessarily. No, you have to throttle up till you get to 155, and that's where you're setting it at. If you do what you're doing, you're gonna set it at 150. There's no real change in the
Well,
pressure.
if it closes, when you turn it to the knob and it closes, and then you go an additional half turn to 3/4 of a turn, it's gonna be an increase of pressure when that relief valve will open.
I'm not sure that's the case.
Positive.
What I'm telling you to do is throttle up to 155, okay? And that's when you should set the relief valve, okay? So you're throttle up to 155, all right, the relief valve is closed. Then what?
Increase it till it opens.
You're gonna increase it till it opens, right? Drop it down till the light comes on. The light comes on, go back up, right? And then come back. So it's at 155, you throttle up. I'm sorry, you throttle up, you're at 155, you turn the relief valve on, drop it until the relief valve comes on, go back up till it's closed, and then you should be good to go. Okay? Again, easier to do than it is to explain.
Unless the relief valve is all the way down, which when you turn it
Which
on,
would be a pain in the ass, is which you really should not do, yeah.
Sometimes people have done that, though.
Yeah.
All the way. So you have to crank it up.
I think when people are checking it on Monday, they think that for some reason, again, it could be because memory, there's an issue with memory. So just leave it right where it's at, you should be, it's a lot, because what happens is you turn it on, then you really gotta crank it up until you get to right around the good area. Okay? Okay, next, we're gonna open the appropriate discharge valve. Remember, we had those 10 steps that we were talking about. We're at steps 5 through 7. So we're gonna see the appropriate discharge, and how do we know which discharge to open?
Whatever line's in play.
Right, whatever line's in play. And are the hoses color-coded to this?
No,
No,
Discharges on-
so just don't, you know, we always wish that things were color coded because it makes life a lot easier, but that's not the case. Visualize which hose is coming out. I'm not gonna say I've never been in a situation where I've accidentally charged the wrong line. We've all been there before, right? Right, we've all been there before. All right, so you're gonna see which line needs to be open. Remember, we're opening lines slowly, right, not fast. So whatever line needs to be open, we're gonna go ahead and open that slowly. If multiple lines need to be open, what do we do then?
So the pressure they need, you gate it back.
Right, gate back the ones that are lower, okay? And then that's it, right? It shouldn't be too difficult, so we're gonna open the line. Water's, if we open the line, remember when we're opening the line slowly, that's giving the attack team a little bit of notice that water's coming. If we were to open it fast, they would get water right away, right? The communication should also be there from the pump operator to the attack team, let them know water's coming, okay? All right, we're gonna monitor. How are we gonna monitor? Monitor the operation. What are we monitoring? We're monitoring the vacuum pressure, the residual, right? Why don't we want the residual to drop below? Okay. We're monitoring our tank water level. At some point, we should have refilled the tank, right? We want to refill the tank in the event that the supply line would be bad. And we're monitoring the pump temperature. How do we monitor the pump temperature?
Light,
Light, buzzing sound?
audible,
Okay. What else can we do to see if the pump is hot?
Got some touching the end.
Yeah, there might be a reason to touch that. Do you think this will actually get, does this work? Oh, yeah, it works. Yeah, these will get incredibly hot.
I've seen
If,
steam come out of
yeah.
water before.
Okay. All right, what about recirculating water? How do we do this? When should we recirculate water?
Idle, when you're not flowing water.
Anytime the pump is in gear and you're not flowing water, there should be some sort of recirculation going, right? How can we do that? How do we recirculate water?
Tank lever.
Tank the pump, right? And then
Tank fill halfway.
tank fill halfway, okay? But you have to have some sort of water supply coming in. Because let's say you're not connected to a hydrant, okay? You're recirculating water and you're running the pump, okay? So no water's coming in, and you're recirculating water. How long will that last?
So the tank water gets.
Until the tank water, that's not, at some point, that tank water is going to get hot too, depending on how high you have the throttle going. So at some point, you're going to need to get cold water in there in order to prevent the pump from overheating. So during fire operations, we're going to make sure that we're monitoring the temperature. And this is a little fun fact that I found, wanted to share with you. A pump running at 150 PSI without recirculating water will increase in temperature 10 degrees for every minute. I don't think that's not too difficult to attain, right? So you're not circulating 10 degrees every minute.
50 PSI is cranking now.
Yeah, it's up there, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be running 150
Yeah.
if you're not flowing water.
But here's what happens though. The ideal scenario is you figured out everything that's going on, you've opened the line slowly, they put it out, right? And a room of contents fire, how long will it take for the fire to go out?
30, 40 seconds.
Yeah, it won't be long, right? So it's out, and what happens then?
Shut down.
They shut it down, and what's the pump operator doing typically at this point?
Monitoring this.
You should be monitoring what's going on, but the reality is that you're helping people with air packs, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're not entirely paying attention to what's going on. And I've seen that happen here.
Middleburg Police for your emergency.
Is that what that said? No. I was like, fuck.
Backup should take it.
All right. Okay, so we have two ways to recirculate water. Okay, one is the method that Randy was talking about.
Crack a hose line, as long as you got fresh water coming.
Yes.
Police for your emergency. I have an emergency. See, it's still like really low.
They're testing.
Yeah. Well, it's real staticky. Well, I'm just in the hallway by the door. Well, let's not sit here. I'm gonna switch with you and hand you something here and talk on your phone. Hold on. Okay.
As long as she said I have an emergency.
Yeah, say test.
Yeah. Okay. Getting back to recirculating water. So we talked about the one was tank to
Oh, I get some
pump,
photos,
tank
just
fill.
kind of weird background noise. It's kind of weird, but it does sound louder, doesn't it? It sounds a lot louder, yeah, finally. Yeah, it does. Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks, bye.
All right. Tank to pump, tank fill halfway. Having a hose line stretched out, flowing water that way. What other way do we have to recirculate water?
The recirculation line.
Recirculation line, right. So if you open up that recirculation line, will it circulate water? No, it won't. You have to have some sort of water source in order for that. So the tank to pump has to be open, or you have to be on a hydrant in order for that to work. Okay? So just by turning that valve, it will not recirculate water. Right? All right. And we have two pump overheat indicators. Have you guys noticed that there's two pump overheat indicators on 22? What's the difference? The answer might be on
20 degrees.
In theory, yes, that's correct. All right, I'll let you read it for a second here until you figure out what this is going on. What is going on?
Now I am all the way at the end of the hall. It was by the chief's office. Yeah, now it sounds horrible. Okay. Okay. It's gotta be that recorder box. Yep. Okay. Okay. Bye.
Okay, the top overheat indicator, and these work together, okay? They both basically do the same thing. They let you know that the pump is overheating. However, the first one, the top one, is an earlier indicator that the pump is overheating, okay? So it's gonna go off, right, when the pump temperature is 125 degrees. We get a light, buzzing sound, whatever it is, okay? So that's your early indicator that there's a problem. This has a test button that should be tested when you're the pump operator on Monday to see if it's working. Personally, I have not tested that light or pressed that button in, I can't tell you how long. I don't know if you guys are doing that regularly. Is anybody doing that regularly?
Not question.
Does it work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, okay, it works. All right, so that is that. So just remember as part of your Monday checks, that light gets, that button gets pressed and it gets tested, okay? The bottom one, what's the bottom one?
Assistant Chief DeMardo, if you are back in the station, line 13. Assistant Chief DeMardo, 13, please.
It will automatically dump water to the ground when the temperature reaches 145.
That's right, Jim. It will dump water to the ground when temperature reaches 145
Over here.
degrees. It will not alert the pump operator when doing so, though. Okay? When the pump water gets to be 180 degrees, you'll get the buzzer. Okay? So, quick review. 125 degrees, buzzer. I would say it's redundant, but another alarm. 145 degrees, it will automatically dump water to the ground. You won't know about it, but it'll dump water to the ground. Okay? So if you are the pump operator, for some reason water is coming out the bottom, and you're not really sure why. Now granted, there's 100 reasons for water coming out of the truck, but it could be because of this, go off and check, and then it'll start buzzing at 180. Okay, so that's what these two systems are doing. They're both designed to help prevent the pump from overheating. All right, so speaking of hot, when the outside temperature is above 80 degrees, the engine cooler should be opened, right? Otherwise, it should be closed. So in the winter, this should be closed, right? And then in the summer, it should be opened, right? There's some sort of heat exchanger thingy, mechanic stuff that occurs when the hot water goes into the engine. It dissipates the heat through the pump water, but whatever the case is, that's how it works. So that's why this needs to be open during the summertime. And as it says right here, remember, just keep in mind that when you're doing this, the pump has the ability to overheat quicker during the summertime, which makes sense.
This is laugh. And then I'm like, oh. Just in case,
Canned laughter.
just in case, you know, you. That is funny, dude. And then say, oh, ah.
Ah, okay, so let's pay attention here.
Applause.
Well, it'll be just the hands. You just do the hands. So.
You don't have my consent.
I don't need it. Who was not here for the other parts to this?
Not this
Just the
time.
same. And action.
Well, Bob's take one.
Yeah, one of many today.
Yeah, no kidding, dude.
If I'm feeling it, last, where we kept, the point that we left off at was at pressure governors. We had just finished a discussion on pressure relief valves, and we've moved on to our friend, the pressure governor, right? So, who can tell me what a pressure governor is? What does it do? I'll give you a hint.
Governs
The
the pressure.
name. Yeah, there we go. It governs the pressure. And how does it do that? Yeah, but how?
Redirect the water.
No. Well, no.
Monitors the pressure, controls RPM.
Engine RPM. So the engine RPM, there's a transducer, I think it's called. Some sort of, what's the term that people use for fancy buttons and
Transducer works.
yeah. Oh,
Capacitors.
flux capacitor. Yeah, there's a flux capacitor in the line, right? And yeah, there's a transducer, something in the line that senses pressure, and that sends a message to the engine that controls the engine RPM to slows them down. Okay, so that's what the pressure governor does and how it works. So we're all familiar with the control panel for the pressure governor right there, correct? Okay. So basically this does what these two archaic things used to do. So those of us old timers, right? Who considers themselves an old timer? A little fella, doesn't it?
Nope.
We're used
Spring
to
chicken.
Yeah, we're used to what it was called the vernier throttle, this thingy, and that thing. Okay? So of course we still have those in use here at the big MHFD on 21 and 31, so we still have to know how to use those, which we talked about already.
He's studying in
Oh,
the kitchen,
gotcha.
cardiology.
Much more fun.
Alright, Jordan.
Okay. So a little points to remember here on the pressure governor. Follow all previous instructions, department SOPs. Do we have department SOPs on the pressure governor? No, I don't think so. We don't. Number two, well maybe someday we will, I don't know. When the new SOPs come out, who knows? Maybe those will have some. I don't know. When initially powered on, the pressure governor is going to default to mode on the display, right? It doesn't default to PSI or RPM. It just says mode on there. So if you're going to operate from the tank or hydrant as your initial water supply, you have to start in pressure mode. Yes, right. Okay. What if you're drafting? What mode would you start in? RPM mode, that's correct. All right, how do you change the mode? Right. I don't remember which one's first when you press the mode. Anyway, so one of the two. If you're looking for RPM and you're pressing it says PSI, I would press it again. Okay. This is the level of training we're getting here. We're hardcore, right? And how would you increase the pressure?
Push a button.
Which buttons would you push?
Increase, I think.
Or
Preset.
preset, yeah, you can do that. Or decrease, right? What is the preset set to?
120.
I want to say it's 120, but I'm not actually 100% sure. But I think it's 120. Okay. All right, so you open the appropriate discharge valves. The governor will automatically throttle to adjust and keep back any controls. Right. So this is the basic parts of how the pressure governor works. But of course, it does get a little bit more complicated. Of course, it does. All right. Some few other things that you want to be aware of. Don't fall victim to the belief that you can just set the preset button and walk away. Right. Initially, when this thing got here, that was like one of the supposed benefits to the pressure governor was that you could set it and forget it, right?
Bronco.
So you can't do that. And we'll talk about why in a second. Make sure that you're in PSI mode when using attack lines, or you'll not have the protection of the pressure governor for spikes. If you're in hydrant pressure alone, you will not have pressure surge protection. So that means you open up the hydrant is pretty strong, both residually and static. You have a pretty good amount of pressure coming from there, gaining down. Remember, if that happens, the pressure governor will not work. It will work. You will have pressure relief control in the other trucks, but not on 22. All right, so let's talk about transition from tank to hydrant. We talked about this already during this class, but since we are talking about pressure governors and the topic is up, we're going to bring it up again. So what did we decide we are going to do would be the correct way to have the truck when you're switching from hydrant pressure to, or from tank pressure to hydrant? Would we agree so far that we can keep it in pressure? Is that how we're going to do it? Okay? Yes, that's correct. Mundo.
What do you mean by the pressure? You have surge protection against hydrant pressure alone. What do you mean by that?
So if the hydrant is pushing 120 psi and you have two lines going, if you were to shut down one of the lines, there is no pressure protection because the RPMs are not engaged. Does that make sense? The system is not engaged.
Yeah. Okay, I got
right?
you. I got you.
The system is not engaged, so there's no way for it to reduce pressure because there's no pressure on the system.
Yeah. Okay. Now I
Okay?
understand.
The pressure on the system is coming from the hydrant, so there's nothing really for it to slow down.
Gotcha. You're just kind of not even using
Right. The
pump.
throttle's not on.
Right.
There's no way for the throttle to slow down if the throttle's not on. But like I said, you have that protection in the other two cases with 31 and 21 because it's a different system. A few more points of information. The pressure governor will not start working even if PSI 1 until you get a discharge pressure of 70. There are some smaller lines. I was trying to figure this out the other day. I want to say there was a couple lines that maybe you would have a pressure like under or like right around 70, but I can't remember which ones they were. In any event, if that were to happen, just remember that it will not work. Right? But for most everything that we do, you're going to be above 70.
Yeah,
We're
2.5
almost
inches, pretty close.
Yeah. So I don't specifically remember which one it was, but just FYI.
Smooth bore. Yeah.
Yeah, with some of the smooth ones, you might be close to this.
Yeah.
But all right. If for some reason that you're operating the truck and you have the increase button held down, okay, for I forget how long it is, but the discharge pressure will not increase greater than 80 psi if you have that held down, which I think is way too much. So let's say you're sitting at the pump panel and you're kind of watching, you have the button on there, it'll go up 80 psi before it stops automatically. So I think it's a little high. I don't know if there's a way to adjust that, but I would. But either way.
So is that 80 psi in addition to your net pump pressure?
Yes.
Your
Yes,
static?
yes.
Your static, I should say?
Anytime.
you push it. Okay.
Yeah, so whatever it's, wherever it's at.
You could
whatever it's
potentially be
at.
like 180 if you're not paying.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, if you have it set to 150, it could go up to
You could think of another
230.
80.
Yeah. So here's one thing that I think is a very underreported about our pressure governor, and that there is some pressure governing capability, and it's listed right here. So if while you're in RPM mode, so just bear with me here. So if you're while operating in RPM mode, the pressure is increased 50 psi greater than the last pressure setting. The governor will limit the increase to no more than 50 psi. Okay. So what this means is you're in RPM mode. You're on a hydrant. Okay. Because for some whatever reason you're in RPM mode. So whether you're drafting or whatever the case is, if the pressure were to increase 50 psi, you will get the truck to stop. Okay, somehow, some way it'll stop. I'm trying to figure out exactly how it does this, but it does this in RPM mode. And if it does do this, you're going to get PSI limit. So you're on the truck, you're monitoring the situation, and PSI limit comes on. What that's telling you is that at some point you had a 50 PSI increase in your supply pressure, and the pressure governor picked it up and was able to slow it down, even in RPM mode. Okay? Which sort of contradicts everything that we talked about before, because we want the truck to be in PSI mode in order for it to be able to, sense of pressure surge. But in this case only, it will sense it and it will slow it down. I have not seen this happen before,
I was trying to figure out a way to do this. I think the only way to really do it would be to do some sort of pump or relay and really increase pressure to see if it would work, but, that's for another day.
So you're saying on the intake side?
On the intake side, correct. Okay.
How would it know?
Well,
intake
I
pressure?
don't know. I'm not really sure.
That could only be the only scenario is for relay pumping.
That would
For
be
that
the
to
only-
happen.
Yeah.
Because
Where it
if-
overpressurizes
because
at
if
some
we're
point, yeah.
drafting,
You
there's
shouldn't
not,
get it.
we're
You
not
should
gonna
get
get
it, no.
increase
You should.
off the draft. They have to be on relay.
Right. Or whatever other high pressure source that you could think of, but I can't think of anything right now. So we'll try to test that there at some point and see how that works. All right. And also, in case you're wondering, we have the class 1 pressure governor. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the screen messages that you may get as the pump operator. But we're going to focus on a few things that are of the most importance. So, anytime an intake flashes, what does that mean?
Got a problem with your supply.
Right. Most likely. But when is it triggered?
When there's a decrease. in
If the
pressure.
discharge pressure drops below 30, on the discharge side, if it drops below 30, the screen's going to flash intake. Okay? So you see that, that means the discharge pressure has dropped to 30 psi. Strong indication that you have a supply issue, right? So if it goes back and increases to 30, operator will flash. So I've emphasized this before, if operator is at any point in that screen, you should take the word operator and replace it with your name, with an exclamation point, saying, Jimmy. That means, Jimmy, you need to do something. It says, operator, Jimmy, it's talking to you, specifically because it needs you to intervene. You need to do something. You need to assess the situation, okay? So operator means your name.
The discharge pressure dropping below 30 and then the flash intake. That would only happen if you have
It could be
a constant stream. Like if you
Correct.
If you increase it manually, that's obviously
Increase what?
the pressure. It's
Right.
obviously not going to cause
Yes,
that.
yes.
Right. But
Right.
it has to be a flowing,
Correct.
free flowing
Yes.
line, and then it has to be able to measure.
Yes. Because remember what the pressure governor does. Its intent is to protect the pump. So it will manually slow it down if it senses that the supply pressure is getting low, right? In any other situation, you would have to notice that, and you would have to shut down the pump, right? But it doesn't, but you would know that that's going on. So you would be able to alert the crews that are inside the building to say, hey, there's a problem. So this goes back to set it and forget it. You can't set it and forget it because in this particular situation, the interior crew is going to have a problem. And you need to monitor this, or they would tell you that there's a problem, but you'd still have to be able to monitor this, especially if it went to intake and then went to operator. Something went wrong, right? Maybe it was temporary, it's hard to say, but you would need to intervene. And you probably also have to increase the pressure back to what it was before, okay?
An audible on those.
I don't think there is.
No, just the message.
Yeah, just a message. That would be helpful if there was, but there's not. And again, the important part here is when it says operator, you have to intervene and you have to reestablish supply and your attack, okay? All right, so there's operator. Now, if it doesn't regain supply, that's where it's going to, if it doesn't regain that 30 psi, that's when it's going to go to low supply and you're going to have to figure out what's going on with the supply. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the supply when it comes to the troubleshooting part, which is going to come here later on.
You're saying the residual still may be 50.
Right.
It's just on the discharge side, you're
Right.
saying?
Yes.
That's weird.
Okay, what does control increase and control decrease mean? If you were to see these.
That's gonna coincide with the supply.
Right, this is the pressure governor doing its job, okay? these terms tell you that at some point the pressure governor is working to increase or decrease the pressure. You should be aware of this because there may be an issue with the supply going on. So the moment you see these, I would take a quick look at my intake gauge just to see what's going on there. And if that seems okay, I'd also take a peek at the supply line, make sure there's no kinks in there, there's nothing going on with the hydrant, anything like that. Okay? All right. So I talked about the transducer thingy. Yeah, what did I call it again? What's the name? Flux capacitor, right? I like flux capacitor versus transducer, but the transducer is good. Same thing. All right, so we'll talk about this one first. No interlock. So what an interlock is a safety device. All right. So something has to happen in order for something else to happen, and we have these on the tower, right? The interlocks have to be engaged in order for the beam to come up. All right. So as much as there are interlocks on the tower, there's also interlocks on the engine to make sure that the truck is in pump gear before you operate. So no interlock means that at some point during the process, there has not been a proper shift of the truck. So no interlock means we go to our troubleshooting thing, we go back into the cab, and we review that process, which we've already, well, we're going to talk about it again here in a second, but that's what no interlock means. Sensor, right? The pressure transducer / flux capacitor has failed, okay? So that's what sensor means. However, the operation is not dead. All right, what would happen if you saw sensor? What would you do?
Look at my pump panels, see what it's telling me. That's what I would do.
Okay, that's one thing you can do. Would this affect your operation? And how would it affect it?
No protection.
There'd be no protection.
Turn RPM mode.
You'd put it in RPM mode. That's exactly correct, because that's what you have. You basically are back in RPM mode. You don't have to stop. You don't have to do anything. But what you do need to do is tell our mechanics. No, little dicey. Well, you have to tell the mechanics at some point after the operation that the pressure transducer has failed and it's going to need service. But there's no need at this point to, you don't need to get on the radio. You don't need to tell anybody right away. It's just something that you need to note, and when the operation is over, you have to let somebody know.
But then that pressure governor isn't working.
Right.
Because it's just almost like
Right.
you have a pressure relief valve without the pressure relief.
Right. It's just not working. Randy's very lucky.
He didn't buy anything else, notice that?
All right, so I mentioned this already. So anytime you see operate on the message screen, you need to check to see if one of the green lights is lit. Okay? So this is another real effective tool. The two lights here that are under the idle button, if none of those are on, you know that there's something going on. There's no pressure to the lines. Okay? So not only are you seeing operator flash, but you're not seeing one of these two lights lit. So it's not in either of those two modes. Another signal that, oh shit, I need to do something, I need to intervene. Okay? So operator, no green lights, says operator, and you can check these too here, the pump engaged, okay to pump those lights as well. Okay? All right, so now that we've completed the pressure governor, is there anything else on the pressure governor that you maybe had a thought about, a question, or something that you saw during a training or something like that that came up that you weren't super familiar with?
Are those the only messages that come up?
There's a few other ones, but those are the main ones.
Manually, did you already go over, are you gonna go over manually?
Yeah, that's coming up.
If we're taking a relay,
Yeah.
is it recommended?
RPM mode.
Like drafting, we gotta put
Yes,
an RPM.
RPM mode. Except for the last truck. The last truck can be in PSI mode. The trucks in the relay can be in RPM mode. So if you're asking what 22 should be, if 22 is the end truck, 22 should be in PSI
No,
mode.
I'm taking it as if I'm getting the relay from Berea.
If you're the pump rider and you're on 22 and 22 is the end vehicle,
Yeah.
it should be in PSI mode.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, but if I'm pumping to Berea, then I gotta be
RPM.
on road. What happens if I go pressure? Is there a difference?
If you're in pressure mode while you're in the relay.
Why I'm pumping to Berea for a car?
Because there's so many fluctuations with it, you might get the pressure governor would activate more if you were in pressure mode in one of the relays.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason why you should be in RPM mode. I've never done it before with a truck like that, so I don't know. But anything else?
Because you really don't need any protection.
You don't. You don't.
It's just going right to the truck.
Right. It doesn't mean you can't get pressure spikes, right? Because remember, there still is an intake relief valve. So if the pressure were to go whatever the intake relief valve is set at, you have that. But
We never figured it out. We think the 150.
150 we think is what the intake. Remember, all three trucks have intake relief valves, right? But we just don't know what they're set at. We tried once. I think I don't know if it was. This was a long time ago. We tried.
21's got one.
Yeah.
21's got one built in the truck, and then we have them on the intakes. I know it's Black Maxes. There's actual relief
There's a
valves
relief valve on those too. Just remember too, 21's intake relief valve points out and is capped. 22's intake relief valve is pointed down and is not capped. Okay? And just another place that you would see water coming out of. I think one of the worst things you can see when you're the pump operator is water coming out of from underneath the truck. It's like, where is this coming from? There's just so many different places that could be coming from, but you can add that to the list. All right. Anything else? All right. The Husky 12 foam system. What is the Husky 12 foam system?
Onboard foam system.
Yeah, good. An onboard foam proportioning system. Thanks. But it's not. someone's paying attention. I like it. Yeah. Leaving it hang here.
Trying.
How's it different from a CAFS system? Do we have a CAF? Is it a CAFS system?
Compressed air and.
Right, compressed air. Is it a CAF system?
No.
No, it's totally different, right? A CAF system introduces high pressure air and makes it even foomier. But I've never used a CAF system before, so I really don't know much about it, other than CAFS stands for compressed air foam system. All right, the Husky 12 system can deliver foam from 0.1 to 6%. Now, remember, not all hand lines are capable of foam, right? How do we know which hand lines are capable of foam?
Pump panel, you can see it on there.
Right, they're marked, right?
Also on the label on the near the line.
All right.
So it's
Okay. Remember this part. The third item there says heat. I don't know if that's the best word to use. Heat. But there you go. The recirculating lines must be open when you use the Husky foam system so that they don't burn out. Okay? You must be recirculating water when you're using the Husky foam system. Okay?
So just to clarify
Yeah.
that, the recirculating valve next to our tank pump
Correct.
needs to be.
Well, you need the tank fill.
Tank fill. instead of
Okay,
pump.
or, tank fill and tank to pump if you're only operating off the tank, or the tank to pump can be closed if you're operating on a hydrant. But the tank fill cracked halfway, and if you want to turn, the recirc valve, remember that has to also have water coming to it for that to work.
So the key thing that you mentioned is you need a tank fill.
Yes, yes.
Now, that at times can affect our pressures, our pump pressures. Well, now go boom.
Okay.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Alright, anybody else, are you in? Turkey?
I'm only doing it if you do it. You're my rock, bro.
I'm not doing it.
Turkey,
Strong.
love,
Yeah.
everything?
Yeah. Okay.
Turkey group.
She does
As
that.
long as we're working together.
Turkey, love, everything? And bacon?
Every time she.
Pepper turkey, please. That's good, man. That pepper turkey's good.
Yeah, me too, pepper.
That's really good. Turkey is good. Hot cheese? Pepper jack? That's really good. Whatever.
Good, Randall?
Yes.
Okay. Alright, so, Husky 12. As I mentioned before, we gotta make sure that circulating water. So if you wanna use basic, the basic operation involves using Class A foam, Class A, go ahead.
With that, with the, we have a water supply already.
Yeah.
We're running it. Is the recirc valve sufficient enough to recirc the water with it?
Probably, but I would also
You still
use
want
a tank
tank
fill.
pump?
Yeah. Tank fill.
You're right,
Yeah,
halfway.
yeah.
I didn't
I think
know.
that's the safe way to do it. It just says you need to recirculate, you know, the manual says you just recirculate water. So is
That's
that
why I
enough?
didn't know if that valve
Yeah.
would be sufficient.
I would say
enough.
no. Alright, so the basic operation has us using Class A foam for most of the time, because that's what's in the tank, is Class A foam. Just as a side note, we were talking about this while you guys left. Remember, we do have different types of foam here. What can we use Class A foam on? Slight sidetrack here. Class A foam is used on what?
Class A fires.
No. Class A materials, right? So Class A materials use Class A foam. If you had a situation where you wanted to use foam on a flammable liquid, what would you do? Alright, do we have Class B foam? Specific Class B foam? No. We have alcohol resistant AFFF, which you could use on Class A fires and Class B fires, including hydrocarbons and polar solvents. But we don't have that ability because that stuff is sitting at the station. So, go ahead.
Then why don't we switch phones in the truck that we could utilize, that way we don't have to, it's not sitting, it's not sitting here in the station.
We had this debate at one point. I don't understand why Class A foam was the foam that was put on there. This is just my opinion. I mean, we have the ability to put out Class A fires with water. The AFFF, the alcohol resistant AFFF would have given us, like I said, the ability to put out everything. But that's not what's on there. So, but that is probably another class in and of itself as to what we would do. Some people argue that the amount of foam concentrate that you would need is more than, you know, what is capable of being carried on the truck. We did talk about at one point we were going to take 21 and convert it to a foam tender. I don't know if you guys remember that. We were going to put a bunch of foam on it. Clearly that did not materialize. So the issue is still there as to what we would do and how we would do it if there was a Class B liquid fires. Some people will say, well, we'll just call the airport. Well, they ain't gonna work, okay? I don't think the airport is sitting there, not that they wouldn't respond, but I think timing is an issue. And what are you going to do from the moment you call the airport to when you're sitting there? Will Class A foam put out a Class B fire? Yes, but what won't it do? Yeah, the vapors will continue to vent off until it finds another ignition source and then it will ignite again. So, like I said, I don't want to get too much into that, but alcohol resistant AFFF would have solved that problem. But we'll talk about how to use that. We can still use it, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that here in a second. But the default, of course, is Class A foam.
And you engage the pump, so this is how do we do it? You engage the pump as normal, recirculate water like we've been talking about. Press the system on and off button, so that's this button right here. I have listed here the default setting will display, and it's usually Class A foam at X%. I honestly do not remember what the default is. It's either 0.1 or 0.3, okay?
I think it's 0.3, so.
I'm pretty sure it's 0.3, but I'm not positive. If it's not 0.1, go to 0.3. That should be the standard that you would use in a standard structure fire, okay? Whether or not it's, foam is necessary at every structure fire, I would say it's not, but it's certainly not going to hurt. So you can always use foam if you want to, but that's just up to the pump operator. Okay? For most structure fires, it's probably not that necessary. For preventive measures to protect structures, you use 1%. So that's exposure protection. You have a building that you're concerned about, you would crank up, the incident commander says, hey, we want to protect that building over there, we're going to use foam, you have to use 1%.
No, that was my one.
Yeah.
For the camera.
Yeah. That's where a compressed air foam system would actually be beneficial, because that foam that comes out of there is really, really fluffy and really sticky. So.
You need some high expansion foam,
Yeah.
It's no deal.
All right.
Possibility.
So in order to we'll talk about flushing system here in a bit. So for the most part, flushing is not necessary if you're using just Class A foam. If you want to shut the system down and then run water through the hose without water through a separate hose line to flush the system, you can, but it's really there's no need to do that. Yeah, it all mixes anyhow, so we still haven't figured that issue out, but hey, whatever. All right, here's where things get a little tricky, and that's if we're going to do Class B. The only way to do Class B foam is if we do what? Draft it. All right, so how would we do that? The driver's side is where the stuff is at, but where's the tube at? It's on the other side, right? So you have to grab that, okay? Connect it to the port. Right, you know where the port is on the side. We'll talk about that in a little bit, or we can go out and look at it later. And then what do we do? We have to get the foam concentrate, right? Even though it's not there, at some point somebody would have brought it. Okay, if we're even doing this, so somebody brought it, set it down. Okay, so then what? Pop it in, and then what? Yes, press the mode button until you get to draft Class B. Press enter. Open your manifold so you can just get it to flush a little bit, all right? Stick the end of it in there and press your percentages. What percentages would you set those for, just out of curiosity?
3 to 5.
3% for what kind of spills? Like the massive spill we had today, hydrocarbons, right? So your diesels, your kerosene, your gasoline, those would all be at 3%. And your hydrocarbons, your polar solvents, your jet fuel, that type of thing. Those would be your alcohols. Those would be 6%. All right. We are close to an airport, so thought I'd throw that.
Could have been jet fuel, Jim. You don't know.
I know.
All right. So there is a system flush that's required if you use Class B or you're drafting something other than what's in the tank. Okay. So even though I probably should have changed that previous slide, it says draft Class B. It should really say draft Class anything else besides Class A. Okay. So you're going to go through those displays until whatever shows up in the screen matching what you're going to use. So if I don't think that there's a mode for alcohol resistant AFFF, so you would just use Class B for that. Okay, I don't know, does that make sense? Okay, so if you do use something that's different from what's in the tank, you have to go through this flushing process. So there's two ways that the flush is going to occur. We have a bucket that we're going to use, okay? So you have that same line that's still out. So you get a bucket of water that you're drafting from, so that same tube that you were drafting the concentrate from, you're going to pull that out and you're going to put that into a bucket of water, all right? And you're going to use a couple, whatever it would take in order to flush the system out, open the hose line and let that run, okay? There's also a manual flush that you can do by going through this. And you would open the manifold drain, so the main manifold drain, all right, and the manual, the
flush valve drain, which is a knob. Okay? Anytime some sort of flushing is going on, the flush valve drain should be open. And like I said, it's a little quarter turn knob on the side. Class A, it's not necessary. Class B, it is. There's an automatic flush that occurs when you switch from Class A to Class B. Okay? The Husky foam system knows this, and that's when that quarter turn, whatever that knob on the side, the flush valve drain has to be open. Okay? Stumpy? Good? Randall, everybody? Good with that? So you're drafting, draft Class B, stick the tube in, up arrow to whatever you need. Okay? When you're done, open the main manifold and the flush valve drain, let it drain out, open the hose line that you were using, and let that flush out as well.
Don't need to do this.
Yeah, at some point. We've used all the training foam, so maybe there is something else we can use. Since we're not using F500, we may be able to draft that through it. Right?
Yeah, it's just gonna sit
It's just
there.
gonna sit there and expire, so. That day, remember that day we went up to the training facility? We used a lot of foam that day.
Is it 500 multiple use?
Yes, it is.
What is the stuff we used to dump in the water tank? Was that F500?
It was F500. There are other displays that you can go through, so if you're the pump operator, you can find out how much water is flowing through the flow meter. Now, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, I don't want to confuse people, but this is going to be very shocking. If one of the hose lines has a flow meter on it, you could theoretically, instead of determining pump discharge pressure the way we do it before, right, when you do all those calculations, if you know what the flow rate is for the nozzle, you could theoretically use the flow meter, increase your pump pressure until the flow meter reaches what the gallonage is for that line. Does that make sense? Right, so if you're using an adjustable gallonage constant flow nozzle set at 150, theoretically you wouldn't need to do the pressure calculations if the flow meter is working properly. So all you gotta do is press that until it hits 150, and then you'd be good. It's just a little side note.
It only works if you're flowing pretty much one line.
Right, because
it's
the flow
only-
meter does not indicate separate lines.
Right, it's only off
Yeah.
the main
The
discharge.
main,
of the
it'll
pump.
tell you how much total water is coming
Right,
out.
which could
Right.
help you.
Yeah. It'll tell you how much total water flowing, total foam used. So if you, that's just one of the displays you can.
It's
play
good
around
after
with.
the fire, I always
Yeah.
try to radio
Yeah.
that, like you said you wanted, so.
Okay. I think that's the last slide for this. Okay, any other questions on the Husky foam system? All right, we're into troubleshooting. There's basically 4 parts of troubleshooting that you should be focused on in case there was a problem. The first one is procedural problem. Some of these things kind of cross over, but we'll talk about procedural problems first. So what is a procedural problem? Somehow a problem or procedure specific with your fire engine during pump engagement, such as a switch lever, wasn't properly done. So you need to go back and check these switches, make sure they're complete, right? Each truck has its own kind of like quirky little things that has to get done on it. It's those type of things that we're focused on when we talk about this. Like for example, 22, if the air pressure is not above what? Yeah, the air pressure has to be at what?
100?
80. Right? So it's just things like that. And there it is. So it's necessary to have at least 80 psi of air pressure before the shift will occur. And that's specific to 22. The other trucks don't have that. Not aware. All right. Even though we discussed these procedural problems, one of the best things to do, at least initially, would be to check your, if you're on 22, remember to check, make sure that one of those 2 green lights is lit, right? So that will at least let you know that that's working. Also, remember when you first put the truck in the pump here, you listened for the switchover, you made sure the 2 green lights came on, right? The miles per hour gauge went up. So you're doing like troubleshooting before it happens. But the other thing you do besides doing that, is you can trace the water back to the start. And by doing that, you're gonna look real quick at the hydrant just to make sure that there's no kinks in it, the hydrant hasn't failed, supply line hasn't failed. Those are your quick checks. All right, so you monitor your intake gauge. The residual pressure should not drop below 20. What will happen if you let it drop below 20?
Damage the pump.
And the water lines, right? Okay. All right, how do we fix supply problems? How do we fix supply problems?
Work out any kinks?
That's good, so work on the kinks, because those are obvious, you can see those, right? What else can you do?
Check your tank, the pump.
Right, sometimes that moves, right? So make sure that's open, if you're going off the tank. Anything else?
Did you have air in the system, so you may have to prime?
I like it, good. Any valves open that could be stealing water, right? Did you check that the tank was full prior to starting the operation? You probably checked that in the morning, right? By the way, I'll say this now. There's going to be potentially, I don't know, some questions that pop up during the testing that could be directed towards supply problems, which we'll talk about then.
I heard that you can just pick that
Oh, totally. He'll eat.
Green and
I don't know if you can tell, but he likes food, so.
Star Wars figurines.
Yeah. You get a line.
You can play the lightsabers.
Yeah. You got Vader
It's
mask
gonna be so
going
much fun.
on.
You'll love it.
I heard the test doesn't matter, so it shouldn't really be sweated.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It
All right,
only
so
been
more.
good for 5 years. Matter how.
All right, well, we've already talked about this. So some more supply issues. Make sure that the valve that allows water to enter the pump from the hydrant is fully open, right? There's two of those, either the piston intake valve, or if you're gonna use the 3-inch on the side, right? Make sure that was fully open. Let's see, things entering the strainer. How would you know that?
Right here.
You might hear it, but for the most part, you probably would not know. I did see something on online the other day. I don't know how engaged you guys are in either Facebook or Instagram. Some of the pages that are on there, they're pretty good. Especially on Instagram, there's a lot of fire department related pages. I mean, honestly, they're really good. They point out a lot of little tips and points and stuff like that. But I happened to see one. If you're looking for a good one, it's called Train Your Probie on Instagram. They did have one where they were drafting, and there was like a catfish in the yeah. I'm like, is this staged? I couldn't
That
really
is
tell,
crazy, dude.
In the strainer?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if it was staged or not, but you don't know.
How did it get up there? Isn't there a strainer
yeah,
on the intake?
yeah. So that's why I thought something's weird, but.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Train Your Probie is a pretty good Instagram page if you want to follow that.
Next one here, Randy lost 10 pounds. No way.
Okay, one of the key
Yeah.
one of the key troubleshooting sections that we're going to talk about is the pump shift. If you remember, we had a handout a few months ago that talked about the pump shift shuffle. Remember the pump shift shuffle?
I try to forget. Possible.
Why you do the pump shift shuffle?
I don't.
That's too much. That's
Okay, so the pump shift shuffle. Basically, the pump shift issues revolve around the fact that the pump is not in pump gear. Okay, this is probably next to supply issues. Probably this is your number one troubleshooting problem. Okay, so how do we figure this out? All right, so once you determine that it's not a supply problem, you can go ahead and move to pump troubles or pump shift troubles. So you've eliminated the fact that there's a supply issue causing whatever the problem is, and now you've advanced over to the pump shift. Okay. Now remember, pump shift is second here because some of the pump shift troubleshooting we did when we stepped out of the truck. RPMs, visual, 2 lights, and you heard it, right? So that's why this is kind of secondary. All right, so if it is the pump shift and you didn't do those three things, what you need to do is do those three things. So you're having an issue, you're not getting pressure, you check the supply, so you go back in the truck, right, and you look to see if you have your two lights. What if you don't?
Repeat the process.
Right, so repeat the process. So go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So try to put the truck and pump here. What if you're having trouble actually shifting? What would you do?
Neutral reverse.
Neutral
drive.
Drive.
I was trying to do that.
So here's, again, you're having issues with the pump shift that's not working. So the first thing you would do, all right, try it again. Just straight up try it again. If it does not work, go ahead and do the neutral, reverse, neutral, drive. I say it slow because you should do it slowly, not because you're going to be shitting yourself at this point. I guarantee you'll be shitting yourself, okay? And the pressure's going to be on you. Everyone's going to be asking where the water is. You got to remain calm and do this slowly. Right? Neutral, reverse, neutral, drive. At this point, if that does not work, you should probably let command know that you're having a problem. Okay? And by letting command know you have a problem, you're letting everybody else know that you have a problem. The next thing you can do is try to move the truck forward or backward about 3 to 5 feet, depending on where you're at. Okay? If it's easier to move the truck forward, go ahead and move the truck forward. If it's not, go ahead and move the truck backward. Okay? Just make sure you don't hit it, because that would be bad. That would really complicate things if you hit somebody. I'm not an expert, but that's what I heard. All right, so do that, and then if that doesn't work, we'll go ahead and do the manual pump shift. All right, so how do we do the manual pump shift?
We just did it. Actually.
Oh, did you? Okay.
You were here.
Yeah, we did it on.
22, remember? Yeah, when it was cold out, we were trying to determine if it was. Remember, Mike, you were there.
Yeah, it was hard.
We've had problems with
21 we were able to do it.
21s I did the other, last time, I think we did 2 times ago when
I
we were.
just did it the other day.
Yeah. So 21s is working, and I was able to do it by myself, which they say you can't do, but you can do it. 22s has been a pain in the ass for a long time, and I don't think we've ever successfully been able to activate the manual pump shift using 22, but we'll try again.
Well, last time we did it by one man.
On 20
in the cab and did everything and then come out and pull it.
Right, but it's tight. It's tight. You did it on 22?
That's what, like Jim's saying, we
Okay.
all did it a couple months ago.
Yeah.
It didn't
Yeah,
work
it was
because
22.
you could never not get it, cause, 21 has the electric disconnect.
Yeah.
Which disconnects everything electrically.
Yeah.
Because remember, it was out, we put it in drive and it sucked it back in.
Yeah.
That was 22.
Yeah, but we couldn't get it to not work, like, we could disable it in 21, if I remember right.
That was
Yeah.
the question.
Right?
Yes.
Because it wasn't malfunctioning. so
Right,
it was
right,
trouble.
that's
Right.
what,
Right.
we've never been able to figure that out.
So we'll try it again and see how it works. But all right, in the event, and again, notice it's not available on 2531. So 2531 does not have that. So important note. So you can still do the other things on 31. You'd have to skip this step. In order to do this, you place one firefighter in the driver's seat and one at the pump panel. So this is going over the correct way to do it, but you can do it by yourself. You put the transmission into neutral. Okay, so you're in the truck. You find out it's not working. You get in the truck. You're in neutral. Right? Pull the parking brake if it's not already pulled. And put your foot on the brake. Okay? This is an important step because if something's screwed up, okay, and you don't have the truck chalked, it could move. Right? So make sure your foot is on the brake. You put the shift in the middle or the neutral position. Right? Gonna make that sound. Repeat after me. So you get out of the vehicle and push the manual pump shift control, either in or out, depending on what model it is. I never remember which one it is. I just read the thing in there. Whatever it says, pull for road, push for, that's what I do. Okay. So then you go back into the truck, put the truck into pump here, all the way down, and then go ahead and put it in drive. The simple way to remember this is that this procedure is replacing, or is it, the manual pump shift is replacing that middle step. It's the same thing, if that helps. All right, so you get in the truck, put on the brake, parking brake is on, put it in neutral, get out, push or pull, get back in, all the way down, dry. Okay? And then, if it doesn't work at this point, obviously let command know that you're a superhero and you solved the riddle. Alright, so on to discharge problems. So discharge problems begin from the time the discharge is at the discharge point to the nozzle. Okay? So anything from this is what we're talking about. So this is the third thing down the line. We've eliminated supply issues. We've eliminated pump shift troubles. Now we're moving on to discharge problems. Sometimes the discharge problem might be more obvious. You know, if the attack team is saying that they're not able to get water, it may be more obvious that you have a discharge issue versus supply and or pump shift. Because if they had water at one point, the pump shift probably was working. Okay. All right, so if the attack team is asking for water and you've opened the discharge, you can have a few problems. So you want to make sure that the proper valve is open. I'm going to be honest with you, I've done this before where you open the wrong line. So the line X is stretched, cross lay 1, but you've charged, you know, cross lay 2.
A, B, C, D.
Yeah. Okay. No, geez, I opened the lever. They should be getting water.
That'd be a bad day.
Meanwhile, the bed's like.
Oh, gosh.
They blew a pre-connect off the road into the green hole.
Oh my God.
Blew it off.
Look, this should happen. So.
I hope I never do it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying there was a lot of pressure in the wrong line.
That's bad stuff.
All right. And just remember to do, when that line comes off the truck, I mean, I go out and I look at it, like, I am not doing that. I'm not pulling the wrong line. So just make sure that, even if you're up on top, the line goes off, I still get out and I look and I check, and it just makes me feel that much better that I've opened the correct line, because I've done it once before, and it is not cool. All right. You're always going to have to monitor what your pump discharge pressures are. So, if one line is going out and it's flowing 150 psi, and now it's flowing 50 psi, you can kind of dictate what the issue is. Right? If the attack team, I'll give you some scenarios. If the attack team calls you back and says that they have low flow, and of course the line is always more pressure, right? They really don't need more pressure, they need more flow, probably, and pressure, right? So they need a combination. Whatever the case may be, they're going to tell you they need more pressure. All right, so if the line was set at 150 and now it's at 50, or something lower than what it was set at, what do you think the issue is? You probably have a burst line. What if you're throttling, all right, so they ask for more pressure, you're throttling up, the pressure's staying about the same, but they're still asking for water.
Pressure staying the same.
Or right around the same.
Could be a king.
No? Same thing, you probably have a burst line. Okay. What if
Roll that tape back.
what if the attack team is asking for pressure, you increase, the pressure increases significantly, right, but they're still asking for water, you probably have a kink then. Okay? In that case, one of two things should happen. One, you should let them know that there's a kink so that the third guy on the line can try to search for it. But you should also look outside and take a peek. Do I have a kink that I can visually see? Because then you can fix that, right? The guy doesn't. You don't want the guy to have to come out of the building, fix that kink when you're. Yeah. It's like, seriously? That would be embarrassing. Also, I'll be honest with you. That would suck. Okay. All right, we already reviewed all these things. Remember to know the difference between intakes and discharges. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but sometimes you got to remember what an intake looks like and what a discharge looks like. On that note, too, just out of whatever, when you're talking about male versus female, on the supply line for the 3-inch off the back, what collar is on there? Or, yeah, what collar is on there?
Off the supply.
The 3-inch line right now, what does it have on the back? What is on there?
Should have male threads.
Okay.
It has a adapter for male threads. Set
It's set up for attack, right? I'm just, just so that when you pull that off and you see Because what's that set up for? The blitz fire, right. So just remember that that's what that, you know, that collar on there is set up for attack, and if you're gonna use a 3-inch for supply, that has to come off. Okay, as always, anytime we're doing any type of pump operations, there has to be this safety alert. There's certain things that we're gonna have to do to make sure that everybody stays safe, okay? So anytime lines are under pressure, you have to clear them. That includes the supply line from the hydrant to the engine, okay? So once that happens, we're in full training mode, we're in full ready to go, and I'll let you go on. There should be no less than 2 firefighters on a hand line at any time, okay? I speak from experience on this because when I was in Brunswick Hills, we were doing a training where we had one guy on a hose line. Now granted, he was a smaller dude, but the guy on the operating the pump was relatively new. Now I was standing next to him, so I probably should have slowed it down a little bit, but he throttled up real quick, and this guy launched. And if you don't think that this could happen, it happened. He hurt his knee and he was out for several months. Wow. So 2 guys on the hand line at all times, okay? Open and close valves slowly, we know about that. Open bleeder valves prior to opening any discharge or intake valves. This comes from experience too, because Ricky and I saw Ricky almost get his face ripped off by high pressure when he was taking off a cap that was tight. So just remember, anytime you open a cap or anything like that on the side of the truck, that the bleeder valve is open first. All right, that bleeds off any pressure, especially when if you're like trying to get that thing off and it's not coming off. It may be under pressure, and that's why it's sticking on there. So pull the bleeders. And then close the bleeder. Don't forget to close the bleeder, because you don't want the bleeder open. That's another, where's all this water coming from type thing. Remember, the pump operator has the ability to hit the idle button or the red emergency stop and shut down the lines if necessary. And then monitor pump temperatures and recirculate water anytime water is not flowing. That protects the pump, that protects everything. Because that water can come out hot, like really, really hot, and it can burn somebody. But we don't want to burn anybody because that's like the opposite of what we do. Yeah. We did mention it before. Remember, you're keeping your hand touching the intakes and all that, touching discharges, right? That's part of your process. Okay. So that's it for now. We'll have Randy go shopping or something, but there are a few things I'd like to try to do one of these things this afternoon. If possible, because like I said, the procedure to do this is different now than it was before. I just want to see how this is going to go. I do have what I'm calling random scenarios that I'm adding to the end of each one of these. And like I say, I'm calling them randoms. Randoms in the sense that, not like randoms that Randy's used to. Waiting on class for that. Anyhow.
Can you elaborate, Randy? Can you explain?
Just kidding.
What are we talking about?
Just kidding. All right, so the randoms, all right, are additional, basically additional training, but one guy is going to have to be the one that's going to be the guinea pig for each one. Because there's just not a whole lot of time to review each of these things here in class, these are going to get reviewed on the fire ground. We'll talk about them. And I think there's 6 of them. But you're going to pick one of these scenarios out at random. You get it? Random, because you're pulling it out at random. And some of them are incredibly easy. It's like a question. Like you'll have to answer a question and you'll be done. Okay. Other ones are a little bit more complicated, and you'll hopefully not be the one that gets a complicated one. You get the easy random, and then you'll be done. All right. But each time we do these randoms, we're going to talk about it afterwards, and we'll review it. All right. So you're not being tested whether you know what to do or you don't know what to do. It's irrelevant. I'll go into it.
That's all, folks.